Hello! Oh my goodness. Hello, hello, hello. I have a lot to say. My bad. So let me first off and start by saying I'm so sorry for the delay. What ended up happening is I thought I had everything ready. It was not until I tried to prepare the stream and, get it set up that I realized I am not ready. And I spent what was probably the last 5 hours frantically filling in everything I did not finish. So I do apologize. On one note, I didn't want to reschedule the stream again because I've already rescheduled once. On the other note, I will be oh my goodness. I'm so sad. I'm so sad because for anyone who has been here for a while, you know that I try to be very prepared when it comes to streams. I never procrastinate. I don't know what happened and why I wasn't ready. So I do apologize for both the delay and the fact that today's PowerPoint is not up to my typical standards. I'm not very happy with it. But I will be making a summary video like I did last time on edited highlights, and I will be updating it and re-recording that so that you guys will technically get a new video to watch with my typical quality that I want for these kind of streams. But thank you guys so much for your patience, for your understanding. Again, I don't know what happened. I really don't. But I am definitely going to use this additional 2 weeks I have to ensure that the next book club will be even better. I know I'm getting ahead of myself because we haven't finished this one, but we'll see how. I'm just upset with myself. It's fine. All right, let me just log into Marshmallow here. I had to make sure. Oh my gosh, for a second I thought I wasn't. You guys couldn't hear me. Alright. Is this... I don't know why it won't let me sign in. So did you guys watch the Nintendo... Thank you, I know. I do really enjoy these streams, and that's why I'm frustrated that I didn't prepare. Because... yeah, it's just, I'm not happy with myself, but I still really want to talk to you guys about it. So much happened in this volume, and I'm still looking forward to this, even if I'm upset with Pastoria. Alright, okay. So let me just try to figure out why I can't get into Marshmallow really quick. Marshmallow queue? Wow. Questions. Is it this one? Watched it direct after work. I actually watched it. Whoa, okay. Something's not right. It's not letting me into Marshmallow. That's weird. Oops. Sorry, chat, let me just check this really quick because I'm not sure why it wouldn't work. Let's see. A lot happened in the direct. Okay. That is the right email. I got no notification. Alright, I haven't received any marshmallows, but I do want it there just in case anyone would like to use it. What we usually do for marshmallows is I do have a link in my description box, and if anyone wants to contribute but you don't feel comfortable sending it in chat, then you are able to send it through Marshmallow. I'm just not sure why it's telling me my password is wrong. No, it's not. Oh, this is bizarre. Alright. Alright, here we go. Resetting. Okay. Let's see if it'll let me in now. Alright. Okay. So I do have Marshmallow up now, good. My computer is very upset with me because I had so many windows up, but it will live. Now first let's talk about the Direct. Sorry about that, it took me some time to get things started. Let's talk about the Direct. Holy cow. Holy cow, what a Direct. So first off, it's very funny. I think on one hand, adding voice chat and video, I guess video chat to the Switch is both brilliant and also an interesting choice. Let me explain. On one hand, I see people mention about Discord and how that's free. Yes, true. But I think it's brilliant in the sense. Hello, welcome. We're talking about the Nintendo Direct first before we start book club. We're also starting late. But for why I think it's brilliant is one of the best ways that Nintendo has kind of been easing up on is letting streamers play their games on stream. Now, Nintendo and Japanese companies have different rules when it comes to live streaming games. So, for example, they don't really like live streaming, especially for certain things, because they believe it ruins or exposes or spoils the story in game for people, which is why sometimes you'll find some Japanese games, people won't be allowed to stream the ending or certain parts because they want to keep that as a surprise. Very valid. Nintendo is also notorious for not really liking live streams. They've gotten better about it in recent years, but they used to really dislike it. I think it's brilliant that they're using video chat because by letting people quote unquote insert themselves in the game, can you imagine the antics that the face cam streamers will be able to do as they play? Like, this is gonna make it so. It's gonna make so many clippable moments because not only are they now like people can watch their reaction, but they'll be in the game with their reactions. Does that make sense? I think people are gonna ham it up. It's gonna be very fun to watch. I've seen people mention VTubers. I think you're gonna see VTubers superimpose themselves in those moments, but I do think it's fun in that sense. I also think it's fun for kids. Like, kids like seeing themselves in games, so it kind of works with their audience. The reason I think it's kind of. I said brilliant, and I can't remember the other thing I said. But I do think that there are things that we'll have to wait until we get more information about. Like, who can you video chat with? Are there, for example, if you want to video chat with someone, or not video chat, voice or video, will there be restrictions? Will there be monitoring? Because I know they said parental monitors, but I'm wondering if there'll be more controls. For example, being able to boot someone out of a call, being able to ban people from trying to connect with you and things like that. It'd be interesting to see what other controls they have for people to manage it, because, yeah, it can be fun. It can be really fun if you do it amongst friends, but there should be some controls if people plan to do it for online play. Sorry, that was kind of ranty, but I had more thoughts on it. I was just flustered. I should have written my thoughts down. It worked really well last time. I should do that more often. But what did you guys think of the game reveals? Holy cow, that was, I think, more than 15 game reviews all in one stream. I know a lot of people were freaking out over Silksong. I have not played Hollow Knight yet, but I know that there were like entire accounts dedicated to Silksong. It was like Tomodachi Life all over again. Yes, I knew it. I knew you. There would be someone in chat who was excited about it. Yeah, Mario Kart World. That's the thing. Silksong have too many. Oh, The thing with Silk Song is I haven't played it, but it looks interesting. I think I'm interested, especially if the next one's coming out. Hollow Knight. Oh, that's what the first one is called. Yes. I also think like Mario Kart World looks really interesting. I do wonder if it'll be open world, like for example, in some Pokemon games, you can walk around and you'll find people who are already there, especially because they have free world mode. Free world mode. I do think it'll be interesting to see if you can like interact with people online like that. So that's why I agree it'll be funny. You're just like chilling, driving around, and then all of a sudden there's like a group of 11 other random people surrounding you. But it looks fun. I'm not gonna lie, as someone who has never played Mario Kart on the Switch, actually never is a pretty big statement. Someone who has not played any of the recent last 2 or 3 Mario Karts, I'm interested in Mario Kart World. Yes, the pictures. I think they were very smart because people really like that feature in some of their other Nintendo games. It's very smart of them to include that. I also really like the concept of the different races. So number 1 is like the normal race, right? Where you're doing the circuit, Lightning McQueen style. Sorry, that's my only reference. Then they have the one where you are traveling to the next destination. I'm like, okay, so you're not gonna get lost like Lightning McQueen. Sorry, all my racing knowledge comes from cars. I didn't watch the third one though. And then I thought that the fact that you can have so many playable characters, the different cars look cool, and the fact that you can, how do I say this? It reminded me of those like arcade car racing games where you can drive on pretty much anything. Kind of like that was more glitchy, right? I used to do that and my friends would watch and they'd be like, oh my god, because I'd just be like flipping everywhere trying to find shortcuts. It was fun. Waluigi, did you see there was someone on Twitter, I'm gonna call it Twitter, someone on Twitter who discovered that Waluigi's bike is actually Luigi's bike and he just carved in into the wheels. It's so cool. It's such a small detail, but there was someone who found it on Twitter. I didn't know that Waluigi didn't have enough money for his own bike. Or maybe he just thought Luigi's was cooler, I don't know. Personally though, I'm excited for the GameCube games. Oh my goodness. You guys don't know. It was early in the morning. I screamed. I screamed when I saw the Nintendo GameCube symbol, and I got mildly disappointed when it wasn't immediately announced. But then they showed the roll feature, and they showed Colosseum and Gale of Darkness. It's a sign. I was immediately, I think I started tweeting. I was like, oh my goodness, I guess who's going to finish their Gale of Darkness run. And then GameCube will be exclusive to Switch 2. That's what they haven't announced yet. I don't know if it will be exclusive to Switch 2. But they have mentioned that it will be the feature, the GameCube games will be released on Nintendo Switch Online when the Switch 2 comes out. But we don't know if it's an exclusive yet. Maybe they'll announce that, or maybe someone else has noticed it. Yeah, the online expansion pass. Yeah. It'll go live on the day the Switch 2 is released. But you know what? I looked up what the Switch 2 is gonna cost, chat, and either I might finish Gale of Darkness on my Wii because that price tag makes me sad. The fact that games are now all so expensive, and even though they're like, yes, the Switch has all these cool features, and it also has like 8 times the storage, that just tells me you anticipate people are going to download so much data. It's not a bonus. Like, I think they needed to in order to keep up with the other consoles. Yeah, it's definitely hefty. I did see a very funny tweet, and it was someone canceling their commission because they saw the price of the Switch 2, and like the artist wasn't even upset. They understood. I also think it's very funny that a bunch of artists are now opening commissions, which I think is very fair. It could be a coincidence, but it's like, as someone who was planning to not commission anything for the next 3 months, I think this is like an interesting artist open commissions to save for the Switch 2 and commissioners try not to commission in order to save for the Switch 2, you know? I don't think I'll be getting that PC upgrade anytime soon, chat. It's just that's how it is. Yeah. The fact that the new I understand that they would say like if you got the new micro SD Express is better for the Switch 2, but the fact that all the previous ones are now incompatible, they are just it's kind of like the Apple, you know, where you can only use the one product. And I know that eventually there will be companies who adapt to this micro SD Express, but then at the moment it kind of feels like they're definitely trying to upsell us. They're definitely trying to upsell us and have us buy more. I also saw they released a whole list of like what will and won't be compatible with the new Switch 2. Oh boys, the new Donkey Kong. A lot of people are excited about that. It honestly, it does look fun. It reminds me of the old games. But I'm not sold yet. I'm not sold yet. Right now I'm trying to I am just planning. I think I'm gonna have to wait until a bit more information comes out to see what else about the Switch 2. And as someone who has always bought a Nintendo console when it first comes out, I'm actually hesitating this time. I think they're very proud of the mouse controls. That's the thing. Like I think they're so proud that now you can play games like Elden Ring and Bloodborne on the Switch too. And I think they have other titles that will fully utilize that. I agree that they are laying it on heavy. It is really cool. And I do think that opens up possibilities for a lot of things. Yeah, it does. Like, I don't think there was anything wrong. I think they're just very proud that they were able to develop this technology. It is very interesting because one thing I thought about when I saw the Switch 2 was before people had to be like, oh, some games you'll get on PC, some games you'll get on the the PS5, and now so many games that had previously been only PC or exclusive to like PlayStation, Xbox can now be played on Nintendo Switch, and I think that has blown away a lot of people because now Nintendo is not just the simple game, you know, the not the kid games, but you know what I mean. It was like the console that was not made for quote unquote heavy gaming. And now Nintendo has stepped up their game, added a bunch of new things. You people can say like they finally matched the other consoles. At the same time, I think what they've done is like doubled their market. Now kids will be like, "Hey dad, you can like play too." They were forced to actually. Yeah, everyone is eventually. I do think that they were forced because eventually if you want to remain in the competition, you need to. That's what I'm thinking. But yeah, it's not saying PC gaming will go away. PC gaming will always be there. I've heard from developers that PC is pretty much the easiest for indies to develop on. Switch requires a lot Switch requires a lot of work to port the games, which is why there's still a lot of games who haven't ported to the Switch. I really hope they do, but if they don't, I understand. But I think that the Switch 2 really blew away people today, not just because of the cow that you can the playable wait, the cow now the fact that people can drive as a cow in Mario Kart. Apparently Moo Moo Meadows is very beloved. But I think as we get closer to the release of the Switch 2, we'll start to see a bit more and I'll see. I'll see. I am I don't know. I don't know. I'm still sad about the price. I think my Switch works fine, but I'm not gonna deny that I'm interested in the Switch 2, mainly because I want if the GameCube games are exclusive. If the GameCube games are exclusive, I'm gonna be sad. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. But it was a crazy direct though. It was probably one of the first directs I watched from beginning to end. Usually I skip and skip and skip. I did skip, like, I did fast forward a couple of the game trailers. New game, can't play on Switch. So I think a lot of the games they have announced in the direct, there were a bunch, like Hades 2 is a Switch 2 exclusive. But there will be a bunch of games on the Switch that you can play on the Switch 2 that you can just upgrade. I don't really like that either. The fact that you have to upgrade it, because some of them don't have extra content and you still have to upgrade it. It's kind of, I get it, but I feel like they would have earned a lot of goodwill if they had just let people upgrade it if it was performance based. But I think from a certain point, I think they said after the games they announced in the last Nintendo Switch Direct, I think from this point on, the rest of the games will likely be Nintendo Switch 2 exclusives. I have to wonder if Switch 2 Procon will be compatible with OG Switch. Actually, that's an interesting point. They said that the Switch Procon is compatible with the Switch 2 wirelessly, but they didn't mention if the Switch 2 Procon can be compatible with the OG, because that one has the audio jack and also the microphone, right? That'd be something we'd have to double check, because I did see about, I think, 12 items that they were talking about compatibility between Switch and Switch 2, but I didn't get to see if there was more to it. That'd be something to think about. Also, the microphone thing is kind of crazy to me. The fact that they said it has the filters that take out background noise and things like that. That's going to be interesting to see how that works. As someone who has put multiple filters on their mic to stream, I can just imagine the slightly cursed, perhaps, microphone streams that will occur on Twitch and YouTube from now on. Could be interesting. Oh, I will say, last thing before we finish this discussion, because we do want to, with the online service price increase to all the new services, that's a good point as well. They talked about zero pricing throughout this direct. They know that they are pricing out a lot of people. As many features as they choose to add, and as understandable as quote unquote they are inflation, inflation padding themselves they are, there's a reason they didn't talk about a single price tag. I thought they would have at least announced the price of the Switch 2. I had to look it up after the direct, and I was so sad. All my enthusiasm slowly started to fade. But I will say it's kind of also in that same vein. The fact that they have the technology tutorial kind of like guide to the Switch 2, the fact that you have to pay for that in order to learn about the Switch 2, that's crazy. Oh, wait, didn't they say that Oh, no, that's different. So they said Game Chat would be available to everyone until March 2027. However, after that, you would have to get a Nintendo Switch Online membership in order to use Game Chat. So I guess we'll see if they increase the price right away or if they increase the price after 2027. Not just, stress testing. You would think that they would do that before, but I guess they still don't fully know. No one ever truly knows how many people will adopt or use something, and then, I guess it's fair, quote unquote fair. But yeah, still that game, I honestly thought they were going to introduce it as like a tutorial, and they're like, this will be available as a paid digital game. I'm like, oh, interesting choice. Also, the fact that now, I don't know if I really understood this. Online Switch, OG online. As someone who does not play a lot of online, it's been working okay with me, but I've based on the Pokemon streams I've done, I can see why it's kind of sketchy if it'll work. But yeah, a lot happened. Oh my goodness. Nothing really caught my eye, I'm not gonna lie. Like, the features were cool, but there was no game that really caught my eye, and I think it's because they were pushing a lot of these, I guess, AAA titles that people are going crazy about. Fair enough. It just is not in my ballpark. Although I'm curious about Kirby Air Riders. I have never played that game, but it looks really cute. I'm very interested in Kirby Air Riders. Astroneer. That does look cool. Is that the one where it's like a lot of different astronauts? Where it looked like they were perhaps a very online play game oriented? Air Ride was GameCube? Oh, I didn't get to play that. Yes? Oh, okay, that one looked fun. I also think like the titles are pretty varied this time, and I can tell that there was a little bit of something for everyone, which was very nice to see. Very nice to see. Alright, I don't think I have anything else to talk about in regards to the Switch 2, and it has been half an hour. New one. Oh, so is it a remake or a succeeding title? Might be. The new one looks like it might be MMORPG. Actually, that would be interesting. Could you? I hope it doesn't have proximity chat, but that would be very interesting. There is a game that I have supported the Kickstarter for, and they will be porting to Nintendo Switch, and it is an MMORPG. So that will be interesting to see if they bring it to the Switch or Switch 2, because at the time that I had backed it, it was for the Switch. I believe it's new. Oh, okay. It does look very cool, though. Honestly, what was it? There was another game. Okay, I don't remember. Like I said, next time I'll write down what I want to mention. Who knew that it was a very effective tactic? Sorry, it's okay. Alright, I think that's it for Nintendo Switch. Let's move on to what we're all really here for. Now, for you guys who are just joining, I do apologize. I am not nearly as prepared as I would normally like to be. I will be. How do I say this? Today, the format is a bit different than it was last week. I tried to do it in a slightly different way so that we would be able to discuss more things during the stream, and you guys will kind of get a sense and get to see how it's different as we move along. However, I will also be editing this stream and posting a video like I did with last time, and I will re-record it so that I can bring the visuals up to the standard that I want. I hope you guys will bear with me, and I appreciate your understanding. But I hope that we still have a good discussion today, because I think we had a really good talk last time, and I hope that you guys enjoy it again this week. So without further ado, let's get into that Lout of accounts family. I almost used the arrow keys. I should not do that. I don't know what I have and have not hotkeyed. So as we ended in the last volume, Kale, Amir, Taylor, and an annoying fly converse as they share a carriage to the plaza. However, the king's... I definitely wrote this offhand. However, the king's birthday party was attacked by the blood-drinking mage, Redika. Although Choi Han, the baby dragon, and Ko are able to disarm 4 bombs, Kale himself steps in to use his shield when 2 suicide bombers are unleashed. Kale makes an alliance with the Crown Prince Alberu to handle the aftermath and receives a gold plaque, and Rosalind leaves with Choi Han and Lark to handle the rest of the things in Breck. Sorry, in one volume it's called Burke, the other one it's called Breck. Meanwhile, Kale heads off with the rest of his group to the Uvar region, where on the surface he's there to invest in a new naval base, but below the current, he plans to add his third ancient power. However, Lady Amir mentions that they recently rescued someone, and Kale feels a boulder in his stomach at who it could be. Now we have a new character introduced in this chapter. We will be going through this book by chapter, which I hope will allow us to talk about more things and more characters. Unfortunately, this is the only new character slide I was able to complete. But we have Redica, so you guys get to see how he looks. Now, I'll be honest. When I was reading this the first time around, I did not imagine Redica to look like this. I cannot really explain why, but he looks more normal than I expected him to. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, like personally, I kind of imagine him as more of a crazed lunatic because that's how he's portrayed in the story. But he looks technically more normal. I also had a new point. Let's discuss. So one of the things that was mentioned, and this was on page 58, was that medals of honor are used to justify keeping tabs on heroes. Smart or sinister? I'm gonna make a poll and you guys can vote. Using medals to keep track of heroes. Smart or sinister? All right. There we go. We have a poll, so you guys can vote on whether or not you think it is smart or sinister. Because personally, I thought that was a very interesting note that they had. Oh, I should also, while you guys are voting, I'll show you one of the reasons I was surprised that I did not have things prepared. Let me show you. I have a picture. Okay. So many steps. Image. I'm gonna have to make it much smaller. Hold on. I have no idea why it's... So this is my book, my volume. And all of these tabs are technically not just notes. They are comments I made, things I wanted to talk about, places I noted down. Yeah. So I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of things I wanted to talk about. And I think we'll be able to talk about most of them. However, what's the poll for? Hello, welcome back. So, on page 58, Kale mentions that the Medal of Honor that the royal family gives to heroes is used so that they can also justify keeping tabs on these heroes. Do you consider it smart or sinister? And I'm just giving everyone in chat, a chance to vote. And I'm also showing off the fact that I did in fact read and prepare for today's stream. Although, hopefully we'll see... Hopefully you guys will be able to see my efforts in the PowerPoint. Well, yeah, that's what I was preparing. That's how much I prepared. I'll give you guys another minute to vote. So far, it's at 100%, which is kind of crazy. I'd be really interested to hear why you guys think it's smart or sinister. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But like I said, if you had to pick one, which one would you pick? And then we can debate a little. Last chance to vote. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright. Poll will end. So 100% of you guys think that it will be smart of the royal family to use this to justify keeping tabs on the heroes. Now, before I give you my opinion, why do you guys think so? Because typically when people talk about medals of honor, they typically think of it in the sense that they are recognizing the heroes. They are providing them with a reward for their bravery and things like that. So the idea that some people, Kale in particular, is aware that what its true purpose is. True purpose. And the reason I emphasize that is because when the king is handing out the Medal of Honors, he actually specifically looks at Kale because he knows that Kale has declined the Medal of Honor. And he kind of, he doesn't really take an interest in Kale, but he notes it, doesn't he? Someone with that kind of power is a danger. They may look good, but you never know what they could do or what could happen to them that could push them into becoming a danger. That is very true. Knowing that there is someone with the ability to do, to have the power to save someone, that requires an immense power. It's much easier to run away than to save someone. It's easier to save yourself than to save others, So that's very true that people are fickle. There are things that could happen, and it's important for them to keep involved and aware, I guess, keep track of these people with this kind of power. I definitely agree. I'd also like to put forward the fact that hold on, I had a train of thought and I kind of lost it as I was trying to think of how to put it together. Smart heroes are usually heroes because they like being helpful. Royal family would be able to use the heroes a bit easier if keeping tabs. That's also true. It would earn them a lot of goodwill to acknowledge these people, wouldn't it? To be recognized, because oftentimes people who do help others, we see them as a bit naive, or they could be very clever and they know what it gives them. But by allying with them, the royal family has another way of increasing their power. I was also going to put forward the thought that, hold on, I'm trying to get my thought back. I would also say, okay, I'll mention this before I read the rest of your messages, but when someone is there a hero and they are able to, save people, the public is now aware of them, correct? The public acknowledges them. And if the royal family is not careful and not managing this, then this hero could perhaps become more liked or, more popular with the population than the royal family. So I also think it's important that they establish and show the people, hey, we recognize that you did this for our people. And then the people feel that the royal family cares about them. It's very much a win-win, isn't it? For example, let's say a hero has their entire family taken hostage and used to force him into doing bad things. Then you could do stuff so they aren't pushed like that. That is true. And I'm not saying you're wrong. That's a very valid point. However, my first thought went to the person who is probably taking the hero hostage is a noble who wants the hero to work for them. That's just how the trope goes, but you make a very valid point. If they're able to protect the hero, then they could also, again, earn the hero's loyalty. They are a good hero. Yes, exactly. They cannot be used by others to do evil. Exactly. Because think of it this way. How does it look to the royal family that Kale declined this Medal of Honor. Now, I don't know if I want to go back and check if the king specifically knows why Kale rejected it, or because of, Kale's previous actions the original Kale's actions, that he just thinks that this Kale doesn't care about these things because he's a lout, right? He's trash. He's not someone great. So I wonder how how does it look to the royal family that there is someone who rejected this? Because we know that Kale knows the true purpose, but I don't think Kale would say it out loud. Anyways, I just thought that was an interesting point because so often, especially in a story like this, where it's literally called Birth of a Hero, where we're talking about heroes, there is so much nuance to the actions that I enjoy that the story kind of dives into. And it's because of things like this that I think it makes this story more interesting, and it also rounds out a bit because, how do I say this? One of my favorite scenes is the fact that, not my favorite scenes, one of my favorite things about Rayon is that oftentimes, because as adults, there's so much we know there is gray. Because not the world isn't black and white, there are lots of gray areas. When Rayon, a 4-year-old dragon, clever beyond his years, acknowledges and speaks about these gray areas that he's kind of like learning and getting to know the world, it's very interesting because he is both naive yet very intelligent, and he is still struggling with these grays. And I think it's these grays that rounds out the story much better than other stories that I have read. And that's why I wanted to make sure to bring up this. All right. Next one. So this one is more silly. It's a little more silly. So on page 63, Cage sends a puppet, a little mud puppet, to Kale to, talk to them. And Cage mentions that it cannot see, but it can hear and speak. Kale notes that everyone describes Cage to be a necromancer. However, do you guys think Cage is a necromancer or a puppeteer based on this one little doll? We're going to do a poll. We're not going to do a lot of polls. Most of the polls are in the beginning, so don't worry about that. I actually wanted to use these polls to ease you guys in. But these are also just things I was like, hey, let's talk about it. Because I thought it was really interesting that they mentioned that the Church of Death specializes in curses. Specializing in curses, and they also heal people. I think they also have the Vow of Death, which is a service they offer. Puppeteer, letting people believe she's a necromancer because that will support her desire of getting kicked out. Interesting point. They don't mention that necromancy is considered a dark art. And what I mean by a dark art is it's mentioned later in the novel that there are dark creatures, and these dark creatures use dark mana. Mana. I think it's mana. But the Church of Death, not Land of Death, Church of Death is not considered dark. They are actually one of the biggest religions, and based on, how bright and pristine they keep their churches. Clearly, it's a very well followed and very important religion, or I guess, religion. So it's interesting, isn't it, that contrast? Because necromancy does have technically negative connotations. But personally, I would label her more of a puppeteer, and I see that a lot of people in the polls agree as well. Give you guys one more minute to vote, and then we will close the poll. Because personally, I think it's a puppeteer based on the description of the doll, the little, I guess it's the little mud doll that they used. Alright, last chance, and the poll is ended. So 66% of you think that she's a puppeteer, and 33% of you think she's a necromancer. I'd be interested to hear why you think she's a necromancer. I have mentioned why I think she's a puppeteer. Actually, I will elaborate a bit more because the mud doll cannot see. It can only hear and speak. To me, that means that she is maneuvering it. But because it is a mud doll, it's not a creature. Necromancy implies that you brought something to life, right? Brought something back from the dead. However, this is a little mud doll that she seems to have created and inserted her own mana so that she can move it. In that sense, I think it's more similar to a puppet because it was not a creature that had, had passed away or had previously existed. It was something she created. Necro. Don't know much about the magic system. Would the clay puppet be easier to manipulate than a whole corpse for purpose of communication? That's also a good point. Maybe it was just convenience. Maybe she's also laying low because they don't want to show that Taylor is that close to Kale as well. That's also a good point. Maybe it was just the form she chose, but her abilities are still based in necromancy. Because they did label it as necromancy, right? So, that's a fair point. I was focused on the fact that it was the mud puppet, but I think you made a very good point, and also with the fact that they're trying to keep it on a down low. We don't know her skill set, can't recall if anything other than her title was stated. They did mention that she was known as the crazed ex-priestess, and she specialized with curses and made a complete mess in the battlefield. That's why I only mentioned the curses. I don't remember if they mentioned anything else, but they do say that she specialized in curses, and it proved that even though she was no longer with the church, that the god of death still favored her because she was able to use super powerful curses, and she was extremely formidable on the battlefield. They don't mention, however, what the curses were, what kind of effects they have, and things like that. Although, at the very end of this volume, Kale mentions that Cage's curses are mental attacks, and he had considered recruiting her to work with them for, I'll just say it, the revenge that they were going to get on Benny and Marquis Stans. That would be like an extremely effective modern day mental attack. I feel like maybe he is both. Dead Things and Puppet both can manipulate. That's also a good point. Maybe their ability, maybe they call her a necromancer, but her ability is kind of on both sides. You're right, it could be a combination because they don't really elaborate too much on her abilities. So we don't know for sure. That is also very valid. I should have had that as an option. That's a very good point. I should have had it. You should always have all of the above. Anything I've learned from doing all of those multiple choice tests, there is always an option for all of the above. Alright, this chapter was pretty crazy, and one thing I wanted to mention in regards to Radhika is known to be a crazy, crazy powerful mage. I don't know if the story went very heavily into it, and I did not, I don't think I covered it in my summaries, but Radhika is actually so crazy strong that when Choi Han, even though he knew where Radhika was going to be, I call him Radhika because that was how he was said. I don't know how to say it I say his name now, but I'm gonna just keep calling him Radhika. Like Radikio. Radhika, when Choi Han knew where he was, ended up going to where he was, and still was not able to defeat him, Radhika was able to escape from Choi Han. Is that not nuts? That's crazy. He lost an eye, he lost an arm, but somehow he still managed to get away. Honestly, I don't think this is the last we'll see of him. I think there's a reason he is the only character I was able to make a character page for. And I think we'll see a bit more of him. Now, I just wanted to mention that because I don't think he comes up in the rest of the volume, but he is such an interesting character. And he clearly is having something set up for him, being the fact that he was able to get away. So I guess we will wait and see the next time we see him. Could be on high alert since his entire plan was messed up, giving him slightly better chance of surviving. That is also true. At least he was disarmed. Okay, you know what? That's a fair point. I think that while he was on alert since his plan was messed up, he didn't seem too disappointed. He was kind of just like, oh, it was okay. He was very nonchalant about it, wasn't he? Because actually, you would think that having everything thwarted, like if you plan 4 things and all 4 things don't turn out the way that you planned, wouldn't you be a little more upset? But he didn't seem to really care. I mean, he was like, I wonder why. But then he kind of just moved on. He's like, oh well. And I think it's when a villain is nonchalant, that is when you should be concerned. Someone like Professor Doofenshmirtz, who is like, curse you, Perry the Platypus, and he's like concerned that his schemes didn't work. Yeah, you can work with that. But someone who doesn't care, it begs the question, why doesn't he care? What else does he have planned? And was like, it kind of makes you question, because you don't do these kind of things without planning. So for him to just be like, all right, next one, I think it sets him up really well to potentially seeing him again. People afraid of the unknown. It's true. I think that is a very human thing. And I think that it wasn't fully conveyed. I think it wasn't fully addressed, but it's something I personally, because you guys can see I have so many things I want to talk about. So many things. I think that this volume really established a lot of things. Could also be someone else's plan. He's just the one carrying them out. If it fails, then it's because the one that made it did a poor job. So why should he care? It's not his fault. That's also an interesting point. For someone like Radhika, Kale has frequently mentioned that he leads a lot of these plans because Kale knows him, right? He knows him. He knows he appears multiple times. But what if he was just a subordinate? Someone else is pulling the strings. Is that not even crazier? Because for someone like Radhika to be under someone, that means that the person he's under is even stronger than him. Someone even stronger than Radhika who was able to get away from Choi Han. I think that there's definitely something there to be explored. But that is also a very good point. Alright, let's move on to the next volume. I just wanted to discuss a bit about him because he does not pop up again. But I think that he is kind of like I guess I wouldn't call him a red herring. In the end, someone mad like that can't be the head. He needs someone to actually make the people think and move. That is very true. It's just like in Digimon Survive, how Piedmon is just the muscle and there is someone else making all the plans. We already know that the secret organization is pretty huge. Can't remember if they placed Radhika on a tier list or not when explaining the limbs. Oh, that's a good point. Kale mentions that he does not know the organization's identity or their purpose, and he only knows some of the limbs. You're right. You're very right. But I think this also begs the question that is Radhika in charge of a whole group, or is he just the one responsible for ensuring the plans are carried out? Because I think a lot of people Kale originally thought that Radhika was the one masterminding some of the things, some of the attacks and some of the things. But the nonchalance he has shows that maybe it's not his plans, but that begs the question, is he, like, where is he on this hierarchy, you know? Or he was expecting the plan to fail. Maybe that's also true. Maybe that's also true, because he was a little too nonchalant about it, wasn't he? The leader of the organization won't expose himself to danger so easily. That is probably why they're the leader. I guess that means we will not be seeing them anytime soon, maybe. But that's also a great point, because I guess unless you are another character we will meet in the next couple of chapters, most head of groups do not run headfirst into danger because they need to lead. Leader probably on East Continent. A prediction already. That is very fair. Very, very fair. After all, they've mentioned the East Continent a lot, right? But they haven't elaborated on it. We just know that there are a couple of things, couple of people, including the 2 kittens. Don't forget, they are also from the East Continent. And Ron is also from the East Continent. Considering that there are so many people escaping the West Continent, I think it's fair to say that the secret organization has a presence in the East Continent. I mean, I'm probably very clear considering I think they mentioned that it was the organization that destroyed Ron's family. But yes, very, very fair points. Alright. On to chapter 11. They also appear to have teleportation, so shouldn't be a problem to move from one to the other. The thing is, hold on, we will mention this before we move on, but teleportation is said to be extremely elaborate. It is not something everyone has. It requires extremely skilled mages. I know that they do have Radhika, and that is a good point. But I do want to mention that they mentioned that besides someone of, I guess, the dragon's level, someone extremely skilled to establish teleportation. So if they are able to go back and forth that easily, I think that the secret organization is much more dangerous than Kale probably... Well, not that he hasn't thought of it, I would say, because Kale is always thinking. But I think that this organization is proving to be a lot more dangerous than even the novel was hinting at. Radhika's arm was taken, probably not so much teleporting now. True, but I think they mentioned that Radhika was able to teleport away. So I think Kale mentioned that without one of his arms, he would have a much tougher time with magic. Not that he couldn't do magic. But you're right, maybe they did do an immense blow to the organization by injuring one of their, not their strongest muscle, but someone that was tasked to do more things on the Western continent. So maybe they will take a break. They will not have so many things to do in the Western continent for a while. I guess we shall have to see. This is a very big balancing act for me, because as someone who has read the story and someone who is trying to remember what has been revealed in each volume, it's a tightrope I'm walking. Alright, let's go on to chapter 11. After assigning Vicross, autocorrect, it says Victors, that's why I was going to say it wrong. After assigning Vicross to take care of the 10 Blue Wolf Tribe children, Kale prepares to get his next ancient power. Using some of the magic bombs that they kept from the attack, you know Kale. Kale weakens the whirlpools enough for him to approach the boulder in the sea and acquire the sound of wind. Now you probably can't see it very clearly, there's sound and wind under here. You just have to take my word for it. Now, with 3 ancient powers, Kale heads into a treasure cave only to have a fateful encounter instead. Now, this is the last of these visuals that I was able to create. The rest of it, you guys will get to see my script. Oh, wait, we don't have to discuss this yet. But honestly, this chapter was very short, but I thought it was very good, because one thing is, when I was reading it, when it said fire suppressing water, I thought to myself, doesn't all water suppress fire? Like, I get it. It's a power that can, like a water that can suppress any fire. But I kind of kept laughing to myself because I was like, doesn't water suppress fire anyways? I think if it had been something else, like fire suppressing rock, like a gigantic boulder that could distinguish any fire, that would have been funnier. You remember kids don't put, yes, that's true. Don't put water on a grease fire. Also, don't put flour on a fire. I saw someone mention that. I think it's baking soda you use, but just to be safe, either cover it or blow it out if you can. If it's a grease fire, cover it with a lid. That is until you see fire burning on water. That is true. That is true. But imagine if you could throw a rock on the fire on top of the water and put it out. I feel like that would be a very interesting visual. Maybe he mean any type of fire, like fire from a dragon. Yes, that's true. Yeah, I do get the point. I just thought it was silly when I first read it. Will Whisk go hard? It makes sense. But my question to you guys is that on page 98, Kale says that he mentions very briefly that he leaves an alarm where he found the fire suppressing water. And this is, I think this is just after he has his fateful encounter. Why do you guys think he left an alarm there? Because I know he only collects a little bit, but for Kale to leave of an expensive device, because magic devices are expensive, there. Why do you guys think he did that? I'm sorry if it feels like school. I just had so many thoughts and I was like, I'm curious what you guys think. I'm very curious. Now, I will let you know that I don't know the answer to this one. I actually don't. I think I'll have to reread the story in order to know, but it's so briefly mentioned, but there are so many things that Kale does that are so briefly mentioned, and I keep writing them down. So I'm curious. Anyone have any theories? He was boiling the water because he's thirsty. Now, I think Kale does mention that originally Tunka drinks this water and it turns him into a fire-resistant person. So you're not wrong about, drinking. Yeah, the foreshadowing game of this author is so strong. So many small things that I think as we get into the story, we're gonna have to go back and be like, I remember this, and bring it up. But I think it's also interesting that Kale only took a bit. He knows he does, Kale never takes too much. I think he's never been someone to that's not true. He probably knew he did not need that much. Or he figures he doesn't need that much because he plans everything in advance. But I do wonder who Kale thinks will try to go and grab the fire suppressing water. Does he think Tonka might, swim and go to this location? Does he anticipate that someone else will come? Does Tonka drink all of the water? It's just, there's so many questions I have. But you know what? Fair points. Fair points. The evil organization. Also maybe. They don't really mention if Tonka drink all the water and then the evil organization goes, or if Kale's just being prepared and planning in advance just in case. Are we allowed to talk what happens later in the book? Yes, you are, because I think I've been mentioning it periodically. We will be discussing the whole book today, but as long as it is within volume 1 and 2, feel free to mention it even when we're in a different chapter. I will say though, sometimes as I was writing my notes, I'd write down a question and then my question would be answered in the next couple of sentences, so I had to remove quite a few tabs. Because after drinking it, you resist every fire. True, but the thing is, Kale mentions that only Tunka had this ability, right? So it doesn't seem like it's an ability everyone knew how to get, and even Tonka probably would not mention to people how he got that ability. Maybe be something like the water is able to recharge as long as there's enough of it, so he took just moderate. That's also a good point. What if because it is... I guess it's technically an ancient power, right? It's not really. He doesn't name it to be an ancient power. He just names it to be an important item. That's what is interesting. It's an item, not an ability. Tonka turns it into ability by drinking the water, but what if you're right and it does refill and Kale is preparing in case he needs to return? So probably the Mogul Empire, since alchemy fire doesn't get put out easily, could try to grab to study it for more misties. That's a good point. That is a very good point. Because one thing is, when it comes to knowledge, I think if the Mogul Empire had known Tonka was fire resistant, maybe they would have written it off, maybe they would have looked into it. Because I think it's mentioned later on, I'll mention it as well. The magic tower does experiment on people. So perhaps Kale was worried that anyone with the pursuit of knowledge or who stumbled upon this would have, taken it for probably nefarious reasons. Better to take a little of it so you can take a little over time than take it and lose it forever. I think a lot of people take it all because they anticipate that it won't last forever. What if it dries up? What if it disappears? What if someone else takes it? But I think you make a very good point that Kale is someone who always plans for contingency. So that's very in line with what he's thinking. He should have given some to Tonka for funsies. I don't think Kale likes Tonka that much. I don't think he is planning to help him that much. But it also still would have been funny if Kale had given it to him and he had turned fire resistant. Also, taking everything of a very limited resource with very important properties it's not great. It's not great. That's the thing, I think, when we see stories like this in isekai where Kale is using his knowledge to take things that quote-unquote belong to other people in the novel, right? Some people would see that as a jerk move. It is very much in line with, do you see Kale as using his abilities and showing that he can give a better result to be better? Or is he still a jerk for taking things that could and would have belonged to other people if he had just left it alone? Maybe he worried the water has other effect. That is also true. Because even though there are things that are mentioned by the novel, there are things that aren't mentioned by the novel. So maybe Kale wants to look into it a bit more, maybe study it in the future to understand the item and if it has any other effects or properties. Like Kale has mentioned, sometimes there are things that the book novel, quote unquote, he read, goes very in detail about. And some things that he feels like they should have mentioned, but they didn't. So all are very, very possible. But I just think that it's little things like this that really, I don't know how the author does it. How do they write in so many moments? So subtly, so small. Maybe it'll be brought up again, maybe it won't. Maybe we'll have to piece it together ourselves. To be fair, the second blessing was going to be completely useless for the owner and led to his. And the third blessing didn't matter. Yes. See, this is why I said it's just like about your perspective. We can argue that like a lot of the ancient powers were very useless to their owners because Kale mentions that. That's why people look down on ancient powers. They don't think they're very, very powerful. Kale was able to fully utilize them. However, whether it's a little advantage or a big advantage, technically he is knowingly taking things that could have been of help to these people. And I think, I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm not saying it's good. Personally, I think Kale utilizes them better, way better. But I think it's a valid point when we're bringing up things like this. Be the first one. Who was going to get the first one? No one. Because the very first one he got, which was the shield, what was it called? I know what it's called. It's called the shield of heart. The heart shield? Wait. The very first heavenly shield that he collects, the silver shield. No, wait. No one collects the silver shield that he got because he mentions that it was mentioned to exist in Henatu's County, but there was no owner, and he doesn't understand why no one was able to collect this. So that is the only ancient power, aside from one that is coming up in the next couple of chapters, that he mentions that it was never mentioned in the story. So no one had it. And I think there are a couple more. There are a couple more that will come up. Make sure you guys hydrate. Alright. Then there's no problem if he takes them. At least for now, none of them were necessary for anyone. I think that's a fair conclusion, and I think it's very... I'd say fair conclusion. Personally, I also agree. But I feel like when it comes to discussions, one thing that is important, and I think this is something that probably I'm just used to, is that we do have to discuss all points. You can have your own perspective, but I do think it's important to discuss other perspectives. And I think that's what makes discussions fun, when we can talk about these kind of things. Alright, now starting from chapter 12 until chapter 18, by the way, you guys will get to see my notes, because this is how I usually format my PowerPoints, and then I decide... Excuse me. And then I decide which ones I want to visualize for you guys, which ones I think are fun to visualize for you guys. As for their strengths, it's probably a thing that they work well together. A single one doesn't do much, but gather enough and you can make a mountain. Here's the thing, that's a very good point, but Kale does mention, number one, when it comes to ancient powers, the understanding is that it is a rare occurrence to stumble upon them, because no one knows where any of them are. They are believed to be a part of nature and to occur from nature. So to get even one is crazy. Like, it's seen as it's a great encounter. So even though I think you're right in that Kale is clearly showing that they have great synergy because he is aware of it, I think for most people, there's no way that they could guess that they could get multiple. I think Tonka had two, right? Because he was able to get the sound of wind, and he was able to turn the fire suppressing water into an ability. Technically, he had two abilities, but even he wasn't able to synergize them well, even though Kale is able to collect both of those, and he's going to, I guess... There's always people who are able to get it and don't know how to use it, versus someone who recognizes the best... Yeah, that's gonna be my point. I think I'll end that there, because even though I had another thought, but if I continue talking, I'm afraid I'm gonna spoil something. Let's get into chapter 12. So after collecting some of the fire-suppressing water, Kale decides to save a half-human, half-whale beastman Facedon, and takes him back to his place along with the antidote, a mermaid's arm. Now healed, Facedon leaves early in the morning, and Kale finally meets Bob, which is Tonka, through Lady Amir. While exploring the Uvar Islands, Kale encounters a humpback whale, the future queen of the whale tribe, and Facedon's older sister, Widera. Widera? Don't know how to pronounce it, my bad. Their meeting is interrupted by Bob, who barrels over to fight Widera, and Kale is nearly caught up in the fight until Facedon intervenes. Widera is a queen. Kale is starstruck by Widera's beauty, but still has enough wits to use his shield to protect Lady Amir and her knights as they rush over at the sound of the battles. Lady Amir then banishes Bob from Uvar, while Kale takes in Widera and Facedon and agrees to meet with them the next day. That night, Kale and the baby dragon head back to the whirlpools to maintain them for another year, and encounter Bob, who is waiting for him. After gaslighting, gatekeeping, and girl-bossing with the newly revealed Tonka, and ensuring he'll be able to purchase the magic tower intact, Kale sends him back to the Whipper Kingdom the next day. After learning that the mermaids are collecting something from the Forest of Darkness, which is a part of the Hennetus County, Kale strikes a deal with Widera and the whale tribe to assist them in the investigation in exchange for use of the sea route and 2 assists from the tribe when needed. Now with 2 stunning whale beastmen in his group, Kale heads back to Hennetus territory. Now, I don't think I have anything... Yes, I don't have anything for chapter 12. This is when I didn't have time to finish. I think this was an interesting chapter, and I really wanted to show you guys how Widera and Facedon looked. Because the fact that Kale was starstruck not just once, but twice, he literally found them so stunning. And he mentions that the author put in extra effort to write in how they look. I think, let me show you guys how Facedon looks. I can at least show you this. I don't have Widera's picture on hand. I do have Facedon though. Which one is it? 42. So this is Facedon. It's actually Pacedon that I'm used to. I don't know. I didn't know that the official translation made it Facedon or Facedon. But Whale Clan people are stunning, gorgeous. And Kale is literally so starstruck by Widera, he almost forgets to protect himself. You don't just keep Widera's picture in a locket or wallet to remember what you're fighting for? No, I think Kale does though. I also think it's very cute that the dragon got a little jealous. He's like, I bet dragons are even better looking. And it's clearly because he's never seen his dad, his father figure, be so starstruck. Like, Kale is always so cool. I can't imagine how Rayon feels. Oh, sorry, spoilers. How Rayon feels seeing Kale, like, literally seeing... I guess starstruck is the only way I can describe it right now. I have Facedon's picture. But honestly, I think this was a crazy moment for the manhwa as well. Because sometimes when you read these descriptions, you can't really imagine how they'll look. And I think the manhwa artist did a really good job of creating someone who is stunning. Like, the fact that their hair looks like the water, that is a very important point. Because they are whale tribe members, It does come up later on, but honestly, I think that as someone who read the novel and then read the manhwa, I think the character designer is doing an amazing job of bringing these characters to life. Now, what did you guys think of this chapter? This didn't have a whole lot of action, but it had some great moments in it, didn't it? I'm trying to look for my notes because I think I had something I wanted to discuss for every chapter. But let me just double check. If anyone has any thoughts or notes on like any of the chapters, feel free to bring them up because my whole point of going through the story chapter by chapter was so that we could have more time or more room to discuss things as they kind of occur. It was a whale of a good time. I'm sure Kale thought so. Can I also say that I'm so happy that Lady Amir is getting so much screen time. If like Taylor Sten was the MVP of the last volume, I think Amir is the MVP of this one. I'm sorry to any whale tribe fans. I think Lady Amir really had some great moments. Let me bring one up. Hold on. For those of you who don't know, Lady Amir is the leader of the Uvar territory where they are establishing a navy. She has beautiful green hair. She is strong, capable, and banished Bob. I think that's so funny. I don't know why. Shout out to Lady Amir. She, typical royalty. I think you mean typical noble, right? I think it's true. I really love the female characters in this story. Each one of them are such queens in their own right. They really come into their own responsibilities. Let me just look. This is 12. Have to look at all my little tabs and see if there's anything I wanted to bring up. Okay. Personally, Alarm mentioned... Oh, wait. Did I put it in the wrong place? I did write Amir best girl, favorite character of this volume. If I had to read out all of my notes, I feel like it would make for such a silly video. 11 out of 10 leadership. Agreed. I think she never shies away. We see her take charge and she herself. One thing I want to mention is that we didn't mention this in chapter 10, but we see that even though Kale is not seen on having a really good relationship with the other Northeastern nobles, notably Gilbert, Amir, and Eric, when they are going through the terrorist attack, their first instinct is to grab Kale and run away with him. I don't know if people, well, actually, I hope you guys may not, I'm torn. I hope you guys don't know, but it is extremely difficult in a time of crisis to also remember to bring someone with you, because a lot of people are so focused on escaping themselves, on panicking, but their first thought was to escape with Kale, even though they don't have that great of a relationship with him. I think that shows a lot of goodness in their character. And it's why when Kale is calm and they all calm down, their first instinct is also to see, oh, we have a duty as nobles and what we need to do. It's true. It's true. It's very crazy to me because we see so many typical nobles in this story, notably like Neil, the annoying fly, I don't even remember his name, Neil Tolls, and Benyon, that when you see the nobles that the OG Kale had surrounding him, notably these three, it makes me kind of sad for OG Kale that he didn't know that there were good people who did care about him. Eric and Kale were besties back in childhood. They were, but they did he mentions that they kind of stopped talking when Kale lost his mom. So even though Eric still writes letters to Kale, OG Kale never responded to him. He tried to distance himself from everyone so he wouldn't have the connections to kind of push him towards being heir, and that involved him kind of cutting these off. And it's not easy, for people to continue a relationship even though they were like pushed away like that. Fight, flight, or freeze, it's hard to fight that first instinct. Exactly. And I think it's also very admirable that one thing I wrote down in that first chapter 10, Taylor is not like the other nobles because his first thought was concern for the other smaller nobles and citizens who were trying to escape. I just thought it was so funny that the author literally wrote that Taylor was not like other nobles. Sounds like a Kale issue. No, the poor OG Kale. I didn't want to talk about the roof, but let me tell you, I have so many tabs in this volume where it's just like eye rolling because the roof is like so worried for current Roxu Kale. And it's kind of like, I get it. I kind of wanted to. Poor OG Kale was literally a lout. He was a lout because he was abandoned as a literal 8 or 9-year-old by his dad. Like, he's literally a product of his environment. He wasn't born a lout. He was actually a very bright, energetic, and very sweet kid who didn't know how to deal with losing both of his parents because, let's be real, the roof was an absolute non-parent in that situation. And he didn't know what to do. I don't blame him for being a lout. He didn't do anything crazy, and it was said that he only attacked people who were gangsters. He was trying to be a lout and people ran with it instead of actually like, he's not actually doing terrible things like Benyon over here. Yeah, Eric really did try. You can tell that Eric really wanted to reach out, and he really wanted to be a good support system, but unfortunately, OG Kale believed that this was a journey he had to walk by himself. Parents influence a lot on the kids. It's not like they are the cause of everything their kids become, but pretty close. I think in this case, we can say that it was directly because of his parents. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna say. I personally did not want to have another discussion on the roof because I was so annoyed. I think Violin shows herself, even if she's not very maternal towards Kale, She does care about him, and Kale seems to really respect her for the way that she handles things, because he does defer to her a lot instead of Daruf. Like, Kale knows he still has to get Daruf on his side, but Violin is proven to be more capable than Daruf. Regardless, I didn't want to get into it. I would get so annoyed. But I think another example, hold on, I was trying to look here. We get other parents who kind of show up during the story, and I think seeing how these parents treat their kids, like Facedon and Widera, they do mention their dad, and you can tell their dad cares. Although, to be fair, no one is perfect. I understand that because current Rokusu is willing to reach out to his family is able to more willing to reach out to him. So maybe if OG Kale had reached out to his family, they would have returned that by also opening up to him. But it was just a matter of Kale not having the emotional baggage that OG Kale had. So he's able to do that. He's not really invested in the fact that the roof... I was gonna call him a loser. Except for Taylor. You're right. Taylor's only flaw is that he has Benny as a brother. One of my favorite lines in the fanfic I read is like, I don't know, if someone married Taylor, they would have Benny as an in-law, and that's kind of a deal breaker. And that's not from a fanfic, I'm paraphrasing. But to be fair, Taylor is a pearl in a mud family. A literal mud family. His family is crazy. I think more on Marquis Sten and the Sten family will be discussed later on. But Taylor is a pearl. What else? I think there was one more point. Oh, okay. This is kind of like a silly thing. But did anyone else realize that quote-unquote smell is the most important sense you can have in this novel? Because they mention it so many times that they can smell strong people. They mention again and again, whether it's Rayon, whether it's Tonka, whether it's... I think Widera mentions... basically so many people, and I'm not just talking about beastmen, but they mentioned that strong people smell strong, and I thought that was very silly. I do understand because I think even Kale asked, like, how can Rayon smell dead mana? But the fact that everyone's like, I smell someone strong, it's like, it really releases the tension, if that makes sense. I think in this chapter alone, there's like 4 or 5 mentions. I'm going through all my little tabs. The pheromones. It makes me wonder if if they can smell strong people because of the quote-unquote scent of nature. We know that Kale, how do I say this? The dragon mentions that he can sense Kale, and originally I thought it was the mana that Kale had. However, every time Kale acquires an ancient power, the dragon mentions that he smells a little stronger, right? So I wonder if it's the nature, like, because mages smell different than strong people. I don't know if anyone noticed this. Tonka was not interested in Rosalind. Rosalind has mana, and maybe she was hiding her mana. But Tonka was only interested in Choi Han. And Choi Han doesn't use magic. He's a swordsman. So that, for me, that kind of leads the question that the smell of strong people is not really connected to mana, only mana. Because, of course, mages can smell strong. Ancient powers aren't nature-based, though. They are. That's the thing. I think Kale mentions that in the very first novel, that ancient powers are believed to derive from nature. And that's why they don't think they are as strong as the mages who have mana, because they believe mana to be stronger. because I think they were perfected or curated by mages. And there was another... Hold on. Sorry, I'm going through my tabs because I think there was one point I wanted to bring up. Okay, just one. But it isn't... I think it's an interesting point that perhaps that the creatures like dragons, where he sensed Rosalind, but when he sensed Rosalind, the dragon did not mention that Rosalind was strong, even though Kale says that Rosalind is an extremely talented mage. He merely sent out his own mana to kind of challenge Rosalind, but he didn't mention that she smells strong. That's why I am kind of leaning towards the fact that the smell of ancient powers, the nature behind them, and Kale accumulating them is why he smells kind of strong, and why others are sensitive to that. I just think it's interesting. I don't know if they'll go more into it, but smell is clearly the superior sense in this novel. Maybe not smell in the normal sense, but the smell of whether or not you're strong is like an undeniable indicator of your strength, if that makes sense. Now, I also wanted to bring up, there is one small slip up. Oh, we got a marshmallow submission. Let me just read it. Page 28, lines 7 to 9. Oh, is that from the first volume? Hold on. Someone did submit something. Let me just go grab volume 1 really quick. Oh, wait. Sorry, I don't know why I said volume 1. It says page 28. For some reason, my brain was like... I almost went to grab the first volume. 28, lines 7 to 9. You're right. So for anyone who doesn't have a book right in front of them, page 28, lines 7 to 9 is totally a Brooklyn Nine-Nine reference. The line is, "You cannot die, weak human. You are so feeble. If you die, I'll kill everyone. I'll destroy everything, including your corpse, then myself as well." Now, I don't know if the author intended it to be a Brooklyn Nine-Nine reference, but when I was trying to create visuals, one of the things I did consider was using that meme from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Now, for anyone who doesn't watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine, one of the characters, Rosa, who is known to be very cool and very tough and like kind of unfeeling, she adopts a puppy. And she says, "I've only had Arlo, her puppy, for a day. But if anything happened to him, I would kill everyone in this room and then myself." That is the line. So I agree. It instantly made me think of that reference. But I don't know if the author themselves intended it, because this was a story from, I think, 2018? When was Brooklyn Nine-Nine airing? Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It was from 2013 to 2021. It very well could be a reference from Brooklyn Nine-Nine then. Thank you for that submission. I apologize if I didn't see it until now. But that was a really great point that I forgot to write down. There's also the thing that the story tries to mislead you a bit there, with people mistaking his scent for that of a dragon. That is also true. There's even a point, I think, later on in the story where in another chapter, one of the characters states outright to their people that Kale is a dragon. Tonka being able to detect a dragon would be pretty hardcore. True, but I don't think he can detect Rayon at all, and Rayon is only a 4-year-old dragon, right? So he's not even the strongest dragon, but he's already able to hide himself perfectly. It would be cool if Tonka could do that, but he seems kind of limited, if that makes sense. Imagine not knowing when Brooklyn Nine-Nine aired. As someone who just watched it, time is a construct, okay? Time has been passing. I can't even believe that the show ended 4 years ago. What do you mean it ended in 2021? I could have sworn I was watching the final season just recently. But yes, anyways, one of the things I wanted to mention is that on page 120, there is a moment where Kale is trying to refer back to himself. Brooklyn Nine-Nine's a term. It is. But basically, it's a line where Kale, and it says Kale, no, Roxu's style was to avoid people for two reasons. Either he couldn't communicate with them, or getting involved with them would make things complicated for him. Now, the reason I personally highlighted this one is because in that moment, Roxu and Kale originally, Roxu differentiates himself from Kale very clearly. But he has been referring to himself as Kale. So for him to go have that slight moment of doubt, on one hand, could we argue that Kale is starting to see himself as Kale, or could we argue that Kale is now starting to accept that he is now Kale and he will continue to live as Kale? So let's do a poll. Very curious. Kale, slight self as Roxu. He is starting to accept him as Kale. I almost ran out with characters. So hold on. Starting to accept himself as Kale. Or Kale's not narrator though. Is Kale not the narrator? I'm pretty sure he's the one. We're seeing everything from his perspective. Because we don't really get to see, like, for example, Rosalind, Lark, and Choi Han when they go to Breck, or when other people, Ron is currently not with them, we don't really get to see their perspective. Kale is not the narrator. Okay, you're being firm on that, okay. Fair enough. I forgot what my other option was. Starting to accept himself as Kale, or... maybe I won't do the poll. I cannot remember what the other ones. We do get very few sentences from others' perspectives. Okay, fine, that's true. That is true. Sometimes we get to see, for example, I guess we are kind of third person with a focus on Kale. Because, for example, we do have Rosalind and Choi Han having, like, unspoken conversations. And as an audience, we do perceive that, even though Kale does not perceive that. That is also true. It's sort of like watching Kale's story with Kale as the focus. But I guess in that case, you'd be right, Kale is not the narrator. So in this case, when there is someone who is going back and forth between Kale and Roxu, what do you guys think that could mean? If Kale is, in fact, it's not Kale himself. And I'd also be very curious to see who you guys think the narrator is. No idea. That's fair. We don't have a lot of information so far on who the narrator could be. But it keeps repeating certain lines. Now, which lines do they repeat? I'm gonna bring down... I know that Facedon is really nice to look at, but I think we gotta bring him down. The question here is if there even is a narrator or if it's just a narrator. Also a good point. Maybe it's just the way the story is written. I.e., when talking about Dragon and Cat usually gives a description of the average age of 7. True, this is a very consistent thing that they bring up. There would also be the option of the narrator being the dragon passing down the story of how the world changed. Interesting take, because we know that dragons are the longest living creatures. So who better to tell a story than a creature who could have lived through it all? Interesting. All good options, all good thoughts as well. There are a few lines in the story that flatter the dragon. It's true. I think the whole novel flatters dragons. What did they say? That like dragons are the superior being. Dragons don't have a tribe because all dragons themselves are forces of nature and destruction. Things like that, right? Very, very valid. I mean, what we know for sure is that clearly whoever is describing this story is someone who is able to see everything that's happening. And by that, it does not necessarily mean it has to be someone who is a part of this story, but perhaps there's someone observing the story. I'm gonna like throw that out there. Maybe there's someone observing them. Because even though they mentioned Kale does not know, Roksu does not know why he woke up as Kale, right? He just went to sleep one day and ended up waking up in Kale's body. There had to have been someone who put him in Kale's body. Now the question is, who? What? And why? Not when or where, we don't really need that. It's Albert reading the story and interacting with it. Is it Albert or Alberu? Because in the... I'm gonna have to look at that. The problem for me is because I read the whole story with one kind of, I guess, one translation, I sometimes mix up. Localized is Albert, okay. That would also be very interesting. Albert keeping tabs on Kale. Yeah, the original is Alberu. Tonka is still Tonka, it's just spelled differently. But like, Facedon is originally Pasadon. Maybe it's pronounced the same, but the localization is Facedon. Widera is the same. Widera is the same. Alright, I think those are great points. Let's go to chapter 13, because we have 18 to get through. Tonka. Oh, wait. Are we on 12? Whoops. No, I think we finished 12, right? Yep. Tonka fights Widera. He bumps into... Okay, now they head back to Henatu's territory. Alright. Chapter 13. After returning to Whis, which is in the Henatu's territory, Kale reunites with his family before heading into the dark forest, making a pit stop at the former Harris village where he has Vice Captain Hillsman and the Blue Wolf Tribe children train themselves. Kale then takes Hong on the baby dragon, Facedon, and Widera towards the swamp, making sure to train the children along the way, also impressing Facedon with his never-ending pouch of necessities for the journey. And no one can ever say that Kale is not prepared. Once the group arrives at the swamp, they are able to quickly figure out that the mermaids are utilizing the dead mana in the swamp water to strengthen themselves. The baby dragon also discovers another ancient power in the swamp. Now Kale strikes another deal with Widera where he will get rid of the lake/swamp in exchange for another favor because he has 2 already, and whatever is in the swamp, which is the dragon bones. Now after collecting some of the swamp water, Kale lets the baby dragon utilize the super strengthened, mega powerful enhanced magic bombs to destroy the rest of the swamp. Oh. So I did have more of these, I just didn't put them in. You're right, I think I also wrote something different. Let me just read. Oh, the baby dragon also discovers another ancient power in the swamp. This will make ancient power number 4 for Kale, which is, you know, pretty crazy considering most people only see 1 in their lifetime. Now, let's discuss. One of the things they mention is that there are monsters from the East Continent in the Dark Forest. I forgot to change the pictures, my bad. Let me see if I can find, I think the page number is correct, page 165. But how do you guys think that the monsters ended up in the dark forest? I also think, well, side note, I think it's really funny that they have like video voice magic voice messages and magic video calls. I think that's very funny. Makes sense. It's just funny. It's not really explored in like other stories, so I think it's interesting in this setting. I'm refreshing marshmallows. Alright. Toy hands. Why did I write that note? No one has any thoughts on how the monsters got there? Well, let me throw out a topic then, or throw out a suggestion. Think there is a big underground tunnel leading from Dark Forest to East Continent. Underground tunnel, okay. Anyone else have any ideas? Because they've mentioned that the Dark Forest is the only place on the Western continent to have these monsters from the Eastern continent. The only place. And it's also part of the reason why it's so dangerous, because they literally don't know why they're there. I'm just currently going through my notes. I would throw out, could have been teleported by secret organization. That is also true. I was gonna toss out that perhaps that they were put there on purpose. They could have gotten there in the past. There may have been someone that smuggled them but lost control. That's also true, because we know that there is an underground, I guess like an underground market, underground not organization. The underworld, quote unquote, is in fact doing things. Because I think they mentioned that Marquis Stan is a very big player in the underworld. If he's a big player as a Marquis, he must have other nobles under him who are doing varying levels of duties for him or similarly involved in the underworld. Maybe the continents used to be connected until something happened. Also valid. Because they do say that the kingdom that they're currently in, Rowun, is in fact the oldest kingdom in the continent. It is one of the longest established kingdoms in the continent. There is a history there that a lot of people don't know, but it has been there for so long. Perhaps it predated other things, like, for example, the places that were originally connected. Sometimes I'm looking at my notes and it just says smell, and apparently I've been counting how many times they just smell strong people in these chapters. Oh, yep, I made my point. To be fair, it's probably because there's a K-pop meme that is a second generation meme, and it's just like smell, and it's a very famous meme amongst when I was growing up. So don't tell that to me. Tell that to the dragons in them. Now, one of the interesting things they do mention is that amongst these creatures, we mentioned that there are dark creatures. They are creatures of darkness, and they are enhanced by dead mana. So already we are introduced to the concept that there is normal mana, dead mana, and that there are normal creatures, and I say normal because they don't refer to them as light creatures. But, excuse me. Sorry, I sneezed. But we are kind of introduced to the concept that there are creatures of darkness and then everyone else. And I say that broadly simply because they didn't mention it. Thank you. So I think it's also interesting that these East Continent creatures living in the dark forest, they are not technically dark creatures, but the forest is referred to as the dark forest because of all these creatures. So it seems like the world that they are in perceives these monsters as being, I guess, creatures of darkness, even though Kale mentions that there is nothing or any creature surrounding the swamp where nothing lives. I think it's very interesting that there are very specific species that are strengthened by what is referred to as dead mana. And even though they haven't gone in depth as to what dead mana is, simply the fact that Kale is shocked that Rayon can smell it. The fact is that it seems like the dead mana came from the dead dragon. So it seems that it's not something that is technically, it's something naturally occurring. So it's kind of like, I don't know how to describe my thought process about giving things away. Hold on. I think there are lots of great things brought up in this chapter that are worth noting down. That is how I'm going to end this. I'm going to keep talking and I have to be careful because I don't want to talk about too much. The rereading this really lets me see, like, oh, you know, maybe you guys will learn eventually as we continue reading it. It's always hard to not spoil. Yes, it is, especially because it just, once you reread it, you can make the connections, you know? It's hard. But I will also say that this is kind of not off topic. Originally in April, I was going to have us read a different book for April's book club. Next book club will be in May because I think I would need the extra time. But because the next book club will be May and June, we will be able to continue reading Lout of Accounts Family. I think we will continue reading the story until the novel doesn't come out, the localized one, and then we will start looking at other stories, just to let you guys know what's coming up next. Names can also be something that's stuck from the past. For how long has it been called the Dark Forest? Also true. The Dark Forest, this is a minor spoiler, but they do mention that the reason the Hennetus County was given this land was because they protected the territory from the monsters that were coming out of the forest. Now, in more recent times, they noticed that they don't have to do as much because the monsters aren't coming out and they don't know why. I think we know as viewers potentially why that there are no monsters coming out of the forest, but their original job was to manage and, prevent these monsters from spilling out. So it can be seen that the Dark Forest has been named for quite a while. I think from the establishment of Rowoon Kingdom, I'm going to have to find another way for it. The name could also be something that happened in the past that is no longer there. Also valid, because one question that I think, I haven't seen anyone really discuss this online, is why was that dragon there? Actually, maybe it was discussed. How did a dragon bone end up there? I think Rayon mentions that it's very, very, very old. Like, very old. And if there was no dragon previously living there, was it brought there? Did they not know there was a dragon there because they didn't venture too deep? It's just interesting. My headcanon is... I think you're giving him too much credit. My question is, was there a dragon there before or after the swamp? See, that is a good question. Did the dragon create the swamp? Or was how do I say this? Which came first, the swamp or the dragon? The swamp was the thing that kept the mana there. I think they mentioned that it was the dragon that kept the mana there, right? Let me look back. I think Rayon mentions it when Kale questions him. He says, how can you sense the dark mana? Hold on, dominating. Okay, it seems they gathered. So the dragon says, I recognize the mana sent here too. It smells like a dragon's mana. Of course, there's no sign of life in the mana. It's just a very weak trace. So when Kale says, how can you smell the dead mana on page 176, it says, mana disappears as soon as its controller died. Oh, okay. Because of the swamp, I think. So we know, you're right. It was the swamp that kept it there, but I don't think it was the swamp. I think it was the crown that Kale found. Because he said he found the power there, right? So I don't think it was the swamp keeping it there. I think it's the power that was keeping it there. The mana in the swamp somehow kept it there, yeah. I don't think it was the swamp itself, because that was just the baby dragon's thought. I think it was the ancient power that kept the dead mana in the swamp. And then Kale mentions he had no idea whether someone had left that ancient power behind or if it developed naturally in the swamp. So I do think it was the ancient power that is the one keeping the dead mana there. I guess that would be the question, was the ancient power there? Because it's not a real dominating aura, right? It's just a scam. So the question is, if the power was placed there to keep the dead mana there, or was the crown already there and because the dragon dissipated there, then it, by that kind of resolve, it naturally kept the dead mana. Imagine the tree. And turning the town dark. I also think that's an interesting thing to talk about, because it's mentioned that the tree, and the very first one, was a completely black tree. They fenced it off and it like kind of contained itself. But clearly, like, how do I say this? These ancient powers, people are aware of them, but also not aware of them. It's almost like they don't make themselves known, if that makes sense. I know that people consider them like encounters, so you have to go and, I guess, meet the requirements. Like Kale said, you had to go to the trial, but it's almost as if people don't know that they're there. They just kind of accept that there's something weird about that space. Because they had that tree in the town, and no one ever collected it or thought it was an ancient power. They were like, oh, it's a cursed tree. Which is probably a part of, like, the timeline that they were in, where there was a lot of supernatural and there were, like, magic and powers and curses. So it's a very valid point. But I do think it's interesting that these things weren't really discovered. Because they said someone approached it, but somehow those people never made it back, probably because they didn't either meet the trial requirements or they didn't trigger the right requirements. Kind of interesting. Also, the notion, because you mentioned a tree, I do want to mention, they did mention that quite a few people passed away when they tried to encounter the tree. So that tree has, does the tree, the gluttony, the shield, the unbreakable shield, that's what it's called, the unbreakable shield. What did it do with the dead mana? Can ancient powers utilize dead mana? Yeah, that tree just has some weird vibes. We usually stay away from it. Yeah, they never tried to burn it, right? I think they were probably afraid of what they would unleash if they. Well, in that case, the requirement to generate any reaction is storing food into the hole, which is quite specific. Yeah. Goth tree. The goth tree the goth tree that everyone wants but never knew was, I couldn't finish that. What was it? And since anything that gets in the hole is pretty much obliterated, there must have been, I think they mentioned that when you get too close to it, a lot of people go crazy and then they don't disappear. Like, there's no trace of them, but people know that they pass away. Don't wear the tree like a hat, Double Red. It is not. Well, yeah. I also think it's interesting. I just thought these are all great points. All great points. Because oftentimes. No, I can't. I'm gonna give spoilers. Okay, next one. Next chapter. Because we still have 4 more chapters to go through. Chapter 14. The mana in the black swamp. Wait, sorry, I was reading the book. My bad. After blowing up the swamp. Ignore my typos. The baby dragon is refreshed and it's Kale's turn to go wild, using all 3 of his current abilities to collect his 4th ancient power, the dominating aura, and the dragon bones. After returning back to the Henatu's estate, Faceton and Widera head back to their tribe and Kale video chats with the crown prince. During their gossip session, Kale learns that Rosalind is no longer a princess and returning with Choihan and Lark, and receives Albert's support in acquiring the magic tower of Whipper in exchange for the scattered mages. After a month of rest and relaxation, how nice, Choihan and Cole return and they accompany Kale to Whipper Kingdom to purchase a magic tower, and nab a dwarf rat folk architect named Moeller. Something to note, Moeller has 2 dots on the top of the U. I could not get that character. But know that there are 2 dots above the U like eyes. Taking off from Uvar, accent mark, yes. Taking off from Uvar, Kale, Choihan, Rosalind, Lark, On, Hong, Vikros, Vice Captain Hillsman, Hans, and the Wolf Tribe children ride the waves towards Whipper. Along the journey, Kale finally names the baby dragon Rayon Mir in a sweet moment, hoping the dragon's life will be filled with joy. They also reunite with Widera and meet with the Whale King Seakeller. Now, fun fact, in the original translation I read, his name was Sheckler. This is a very different name. His name is now Seakeller, and his loyal mischief maker, Archie. Using his new ancient power, Kale puts Archie in his place and receives 3 items from Widera, including a bottle of pure dragon dead mana. Arriving in Whipper, Kale meets up with Billows and begins his treasure hunt. Now, there are a couple of things I want to bring up in this chapter. The best scene. The best scene is when Rayon is receiving his own name from Kale. 203 and 204. Seeing the whole scene, I won't read it out. My voice is kind of giving me trouble, but the emotions that are involved when Kale is telling Rayon his name, and also Rayon's reaction. Like, I think it says right here. Hold on. Wait, did I get the page wrong? Whoops. Hold on. Uh-oh, I did get the page wrong. My bad. Let me see. Just, 213 and 214. My bad. 213. So it says here. Hold on. I want to read it directly. After 4 years of life, the Black Dragon had received a first and last name. Now something other than his body belongs solely to him. When Rayon is reflecting on the fact, like, the outside, the darkness of the outside world and the darkness of the cave, it's such a sweet but sad moment. And for, like, Kale and his son to have this very, very sweet moment between the 2 of them, it's like the first time, I think, on a rare occasion where Kale is kind of like teasing Rayon. Kale kind of finally opens up, after, like, acknowledging the care and the trust that Rayon has in him. It's such a great, great moment. Oh my goodness. I will fix that when in my notes, but page 213, 214, the best scene in this volume Arguably the book, but this volume. Now, let's discuss. Kale receives 3 items from Widera. He only mentions 1. Is it 221? Did I write it correctly this time? I did, okay. What do you guys think the other 2 items Kale possibly received? If you want, we can start with wrong answers only. But personally, I don't remember what the other 2 items he got from them. So I actually have no idea either. Anyone have any ideas? Maybe it's a courting gift. No, I'm kidding. I don't think Kale is gonna have a romantic interest. At least not right now while he's trying to pursue peace on the continent. Like actual peace on the continent. One of them is probably some sort of token to allow passage through the sea route. Oh, very true, because he now has the right to access the sea route, right? Because he doesn't own it. But he would need something to let the other whales who are living in that area or patrolling know that he has permission. Very true. Honestly, I think I was gonna joke that's why Sea Keller met with Kale, because he had to see if he was good enough for Facedon or Widera. You know, he could either or. I did reread the page just to make sure I didn't get it wrong, but yeah, he only mentions that he got a small bottle of the Swamp Dragon's dead mana. Now, to be fair, I kind of threw that on you guys. Other could be a summoning calling item since whales strong can own him. You know, that's also true. Maybe it's like the Pokemon Arceus, where he has to use a special flute and sing a special melody in order for them to come, to know where he is and come help him. Because he does say he has, I think, 3. I think that's, yeah, 3 favors now that they owe him. 2 from the original, and then 1 more from getting rid of the swamp. Very true. Now, another thing I want to kind of throw out there is, how did the whales get rid of the poison in the swamp? Because this is something I don't know if is discussed later. They mentioned that the swamp is poisonous, and maybe the whales are more advanced. But one thing that I didn't go into detail about in the plot summary overview is that Pasodon was poisoned by the mermaids, and he didn't know because may not be mentioned till later. Mermaid poison is lethal. It is lethal. There was no known cure to it until Rosalind in the novel figured out that the antidote to the mermaid's poison was the mermaid's blood, and she was using that to cure Lark, which is why Kale knew that no one at this time knew how to cure mermaid poison besides him. He's getting way too many favors from Sea Roti. To be fair, he is seemingly weak, but risking his life to help them. And it is on their honor that they are willing to help him, because I think Widera in particular sees a lot of goodwill in Kale. That's why she was willing to give him the 2 favors. But she does say that they need to be reasonable. She's not accepting anything, right? It's not like whatever you want. It has to be perceived as reasonable. So they do have a measure there. I thought mermaid poison got beefed up from the swamp. Yes, but even before that, they said that the mermaids were strengthened. Facedon in particular is more susceptible to mermaid poison because he's half human, half whale. So he does not have the thick skin that usually allows the whales to avoid the poison from the mermaids. So I think Facedon would have been susceptible to the poison before the mermaids were strengthened, but now that they are strengthened, it's even more lethal, if that makes sense. It is mentioned that it is particularly... They are strengthened and empowered, I think, but it doesn't say that they are... This is kind of a spoiler. Mermaid poison is just known to be lethal. That's what I'll say. It is known to be lethal. That's why Rosalind had to take quite some time before she was able to figure out the antidote. I think at that point in the story, in the original novel though, the mermaids were also strengthened for a period of time. Another thing that no one mentions is, does dead mana stack? Sometimes I feel like it'd be funny if I did a whole stream where it's like, does dead mana stack? Yes or no? Lethal to whales or lethal to humans? Mermaid poison is lethal to everyone that is not a mermaid. It's lethal to everyone. Now, arguably, you could say that because mermaids are a dark creature, is their poison lethal to other dark creatures? Because it seems that there are whole species that are dark creatures. Yeah, but I think we talked about how the Facedon in particular is because he's half human that he is susceptible to this. Because if whales already have some sort of immunity, they could make antidote a bit easier. True, but I don't think they did. Because if they did, Facedon is said to be... Okay, Facedon is noted in particular to be intelligent. He is the intelligence that the whales would need to get kind of like a leg up on the mermaids, and that's why when the mermaids discovered him, they immediately tried to get rid of him. He is seen as a threat even though he is a very small whale, and he's also known to be half human. If lethal, how have the whales survived up until this point? Because the whales are noted to have extremely thick skin. So because they have extremely thick skin, they are not susceptible to these poison unless it is, I guess, like very, very direct. Like you cut them open and slowly pour it on them. Because their skin is so thick, they are less. But they do note that if they had, for example, let's say that they're kids of the whales, or if they are already injured and they are poisoned. I think they mentioned that when the whales were fighting the mermaids, when Choi Han meets them, they had lost quite a few of their people because the mermaids were able to slowly weaken them. I don't remember if the part I want to talk about was mentioned later or not. But there are ways. They are stronger. They're able to overpower the mermaids. However, the mermaids do eventually get a leg up on them. Maybe it's because the dead mana stacks. Maybe the power-up stacks. Maybe it's because as more dead mana is collected, more mermaids are strengthened and they're able to slowly overcome the whales through sheer numbers. You know? Oh, the mermaids are not cute. Quantity versus quality. Very true, because they mentioned that the whale tribe is small but extremely powerful. They are the strongest in the water and on land. They can do both, but in the water, they are the strongest tribe. The mermaids are not cute. They mentioned that they look like people, but they have gills and no ears. And then they have webbed hands and feet. They look like people. Let me see if I can find a picture of a mermaid. Hold on. Mermaid. Okay, so there is a picture. I don't know if you guys want to see it. I will... Yeah, okay. The mermaids look different than what I thought. I didn't know they had flippers. I could have sworn that they had legs. Is it a cute picture? It's not. I promise to refresh your eyes with Facedon later, but... So this is what the mermaids look like. In the manhwa, I should say. Oh, my bad. I promise to refresh your eyes with a picture of Witera, though. But that's what the mermaids look like for anyone who has not read the manhwa. Wow, it won't let me go. Let me see. Oh my goodness. Okay. So pretty. Yeah, you guys can hear it in my voice. It's because it's been a couple of hours. I was also pretty panicky earlier. It's fine, don't worry. I still have my water. Here's a picture of Widera out here to refresh and to bless your eyes. But yeah, dehydration is not cute. You know, it's fair. We can't blame the mermaids, technically. But there you go. Widera's so pretty. Oh my god, the character designer did such a great job. Yes, because that's how Kale perceives her. It's how everyone should perceive her. There is also another picture of Pasadon, which I really wanted to use for his Facedon, sorry. It's of him looking super cool. Hold on, I have to show you guys. He has what is called a whirlpool sword. It is one of the coolest things. Hold on. You want to be with her, you want to be her, and both. Yes. The answer is just yes. Let me show you Facedon really quick. Look at that. Is that not super cool? Look at him with his whirlpool glowing sword and his hair. Oh my goodness. Whale people are stunning. Who knew? The whale tribe is truly one of the best looking. No wonder when the author was writing Birth of a Hero, Kale said there were like, I think, 4 paragraphs dedicated to Sea Keller's looks. 4 paragraphs. That's pretty Schickler. You know, I would show you what he looks like, but it's like not as good looking as his kids. Just, he's not. It's a fact. Only 4 for the king? Gosh, I feel like there should have been more for Widera. Hold on, I just gotta make sure. Okay, I think it's this one. Bringing Widera back on the screen. Okay. She's so pretty. She's so pretty. We just have to be able to appreciate that. Alright. Let me see what's next. Okay, now up to 15. I don't think I have any other points. Oh, we were talking about why why the whale tribe was able to remove the poison. Maybe, you know, that is... I don't think we ever have an answer to that. But ultimately, the reason I wanted to bring it up is because usually Kale explains why he has certain people do certain things, but he doesn't mention it in this case, so I was just personally curious why the whale tribe was able to extract the poison from the dead mana, because it said that dead mana is lethal to anyone that is not a dark creature, so how were they able to handle it? Do you think they are like water benders? Water bending the poison out of the dead mana somehow? That was my best guess. I wanted to include a fun visual too, but water is usually seen as purifying. True, but it would bear the question that why they wouldn't purify the dead mana in the process. Yeah. True, water is often seen as healing, associated with cleansing, with all these kind of things. Very fair, very fair. Hold on. Oh, okay. Thank gosh. Okay. Sorry, I thought I had something open that was not supposed to be open. Let's go into Chapter 15. Also, they requested to go to the swamp to collect samples for poison, so that's probably why they got. That's true as well. You're right. I did forget that. Their whole purpose was to investigate, and I think because they found out the swamp was the cause of it, they were the ones who said they want to investigate. I think he requested it because he said that what if Kale, when he mentioned 3 conditions, we thought it was 3 favors, so it'd be like 3 separate occasions why on that the whales would come help him. What if Kale used one of those favors for them to give him the 3 items? Because we didn't see him negotiate that, right? That wasn't 3 conditions plus the item. He does mention that whatever is in the swamp belongs to him, but he didn't necessarily mean the sample, right? So perhaps from what was not shown in the novel, Kale had already used one of his conditions to have them give this dead mana to him. I think this is probably going to come up later. It'll probably come up later. We'll see. So chapter 15. Sorry, I had to take a breath. In another less touching reunion with Tonka, who doesn't even recognize Kale at first, the group finds themselves witnessing a brawl as Tonka challenges Choi Han. After thoroughly thrashing Tonka, Kale finally begins negotiations with Chief Officer Harold to buy the magic tower. Now, after convincing Harold that it is in his best interest to sell, Kale has Belos handle the actual negotiating while he collects the real treasure in the tower. Although for once he planned to be a hero, Kale instead finds himself appearing as a classic villain in his attempts to save Muller, who agrees to guide his savior to 2 locations. The first being the secret room with 2 research projects of the magic tower, a storage device based on the ancient powers, and the reason Whipper citizens have gained magic resistance. The second location being the ruler's chamber, where the best magic devices, treasures, wealth had all been hoarded, the group now leaving even richer than they entered. The swamp is technically in his territory, so he's on his birthright to take as much as he wants from it. It'd be more that the visitors would need to ask him. That's also true because but it's because he's collaborating with them, and because he doesn't specifically he didn't mention this exchange. I suppose that's the question. I think it makes sense, like I said, that Kale mentioned that everything in the swamp belonged to him, implying that even the swamp water belonged to him. It's just interesting that the whales were able to A, purify the poison or take it out of the mana, and B, that they were providing 3 items to Kale, that it kind of just wasn't explicitly mentioned. So yeah. This was a very interesting chapter because I think half the chapter was about how Choi Han was just beating up Tonka. And then it was also interesting that they brought up another kind of dysfunctional family. It said, for anyone who didn't read the novel yet, Chief Officer Harold killed the ruler of the magic tower, which was his dad. He was actually the son of a mage and another person, a native, but because he has both the power of nature and mana, Kale mentions that if you can use mana, you cannot use ancient powers. Harold can sense mana but cannot use it, so he wants to use ancient powers. I think I mixed it up a little bit there. But Harold cannot use mana. He can sense it but cannot use it. But it's interesting that they note that Harold was actually the product of his parents' love, but his dad, the ruler, never knew he existed, never knew he was the son of the woman he loved. I'm sure there is something there, but so many terrible parents. So many terrible parents in the story. Of course, there are some good parents too. I think we will see, it's just interesting to see how the parents are introduced, and it's kind of going back and forth. I don't know if you guys are noticing, where we're kind of introduced to a not great parent, a good parent, a not great parent, and a good parent. Kind of really driving home this kind of, is it someone's nurture or their nature that kind of brings out these characteristics of them? Because even the reason why Harold is so He has characteristics of his dad, but it is because of the way he grew up that he resents his dad for that. It doesn't go too much into it, but I thought it was a good point because it was specifically mentioned, that Harold never found out that his parents probably would have loved him. His mom definitely loved him, and his dad probably would have if he'd known that Harold was the woman son of the woman he loved. Where does Volume 2 reach? I don't remember we reaching the Magic Tower. Volume 2, if you're talking about the manhwa, Volume 2 ends at 110, but Volume 2 does go to the Magic Tower. They are currently there in Chapter 15, where they are there to buy it, and Kale has looted the Magic Tower. I apologize if the manhwa did not cover it. When I was going through the manhwa and the novel, I think it was a pretty approximate, but maybe I didn't miss a couple chapters, so I don't know if the manhwa addressed the Whipper Kingdom yet. Because I know that the manhwa, chapter 110, it ends with Kale and Rayon getting their revenge, starting their revenge on Benian. No. Because if you follow here's the thing, in the manhwa, for a lot of accounts family, it does say what chapters correspond to what volume of the web novel. The localization is different than the web novel. How they group the chapters is different. It ends when they get on the boat and the dragon is named. No, it ended in 110 for what we're going up to. That's a little bit early. So if you guys follow the manhwa, when it says like volume 1, volume 2 chapters, those are corresponding to the Korean version. Yes, it is. That's why localization is always tough. But currently... Okay, we're going to chapters... Ah, shoot! Okay. That there was a back page on the test. I will note, I think it is mentioned in my community post, I do list what chapters the manhwa covers, like the corresponding manhwa chapters with the novel, the volume that we're reading. Sorry, Reiko, it looks like you're gonna get a lot of spoilers. But let me look. I wonder if I had any notes we wanted to discuss. This is 15. Yeah. Technically, I did mention what pages you were supposed to study. But it's okay. The test is an open book. Don't have to worry. I also think that one of my favorite scenes in this chapter was when Kale is talking to the cats and he's telling them... What was it? He was singing a song to them, wasn't he? Let me find it. It was one of my favorite things. Harold. Oh, they also mentioned alchemist. Yes. So one thing that was brought up, we mentioned the alchemy fire, and I think for anyone who was not familiar, the alchemist bell tower where they study alchemy is in the Empire. That is also an upcoming, I guess, location, place, battlefield. Oh, that's right. So he sings rat-a-tat-tat, who is that? How many rats? He sings to Hong and On. It's so cute because at the same time, it's like... he definitely sees them as kids, but he also acknowledges and respects them for what they're able to do. It's on page 250, one of my favorite things. And it's like it's like an inside joke. I don't know. Adorable. Absolutely adorable. We also get Harold's full name. I can't. Harold Cordian. I feel like there is. Ooh, crazy. I thought there was a point to the name, but his dad's name is Feister, which is also interesting as a name. I don't think that was his dad's name in the translation I read. But don't you guys think it's interesting that Belos is like. He originally went from being just someone who was mentioned, I think, once or twice in Volume 1, but he's had quite a bit of presence in Volume 2, hasn't he? He's kind of turned into a recurring character. Belos Flynn, the illegitimate son of the Flynn family, merchant, and someone who is positioning himself as Kale's subordinate. Those are all of his titles in the book. He was important to Choi Han. They kind of briefly mentioned that he joined Choi Han's group later on in the book and he agrees to help them, but it is not further mentioned what he does, right? Because when he approaches Choi Han, I think he is about to show his ambition, but they don't go into very much detail about how he helps them. He kind of just gets them some things, right? But it seems like Kale was able to infer what Belos was capable of and is able to more so utilize him. Oh, one thing I wanted to bring up is that on page 268, Muller is able to recognize pure-blooded cats. Now, there's a reason this is interesting to me. Because everyone is currently on the Western continent, correct? But Muller, someone whose family was born in this tower, created the tower. How does he recognize pure-blooded cats if he has never been on the Eastern continent? Is his family from the Eastern continent? Yes, you could say rat power. I think that was like a lot of people's thought. But he specifically said pure-blooded cats. A lot of the other beastmen so far have not been able to recognize that Hong and On are pure-blooded cats. But somehow Muller is able to do that. I think we could argue that as a rat, he could probably be more sensitive to felines, so like, cats. But pure-blooded cats, I think it's very interesting, especially because they mentioned that he is the only dwarf, right? I think when later on Muller goes with Kale back to the Hennedoos County and he meets a bunch of the architects and craftsmen who, by the way, Hennedoos craftsmen come from all over the country. Literally, they all convene in Hennedoos because of A, all the quarries they have, so materials, but B, because the Count de Roof, and I think it was said like his previous wife, they really prioritize tradesmen and specialists. Yeah. So the fact that these people from all over, potentially from another continent, because don't forget, even Ron came to the Hennedoos County. So it seems like the Eastern continent has some awareness of, the Western continent, but also the fact that none of them said they are Muller is the first dwarf they encountered. But they knew A, who rat folk are, and they knew B, who dwarves were. So it's kind of interesting to me that there's kind of this back and forth between Eastern Western continent and also a lot of implications. That's why I wanted to bring up earlier why you guys thought some of the Eastern monsters ended up in the Western continent. Just, food for thought. Also, when Kale takes all the treasure from the treasure room, he says, "We're rich." He implies and always includes his kids with him. Kale never says I. He does say I, like, you know, the seed belongs to me, but ultimately, I think he's already thought of the kids as his kids. Very cute. I think, oh my gosh, we're already at 2.5 hours. Okay. I think I'm gonna get through the next 3 chapters because I do have a couple of other slides. I think I had 38 slides, by the way. If I had visualized all the ones I wanted to visualize, we probably would have ended up with more slides. So that's something you guys can look forward to when I refilm and re-edit this. But let's get into chapter 16. After recruiting Muller to work in Hennetu's territory, Kale immediately has him start working on plans for a castle and a ship. The next day, the deal for the magic tower is finalized for 10 billion galleons and under 3 conditions. A. The tower must be demolished within 12 months. B. Kale cannot physically move the tower to another place. And C. He cannot collect mages under his name. Tunka, Kale, and Bilos as the intermediary all agree to the contract. Now Kale sent Lark, Hillsman, and the Wolf Tribe children to collect his 5th ancient power on Mount Yelia before reconvening at Hoik village so that he can restore hope to the jungle. They arrive at Hoik, and Kale receives the permeating necklace before heading towards the No Way Out rainforest with Rayon and On. Just so you know, because I forgot to mention, that is Kale's fifth ancient power. Now, channeling his inner goodness, Kale earns her trust and convinces Queen Ratana, my bad, the grammar is atrocious because I did this one last minute, that he is able to put out the alchemy-induced fire and save her forest and wants to help because he has the ability to do so. Again, my bad. So, just want to note, Ratana does not know that it is alchemy-induced fire. She finds out later in the novel, but she does not know at this time it's alchemy-induced. I specifically mentioned it. Now, maintaining his character, Kale suffers no loss as he is able to obtain a critical piece of land that contains the highest quality magic stones. You know, preemptively. Is the necklace an ancient power or is it just an item like the water? So the necklace itself is specifically mentioned to be an ancient power. It contains the water, but it itself is an ancient power. And fun note, because it was already mentioned, it is the permeating necklace that the Tower of Magic was experimenting on, and that they created a storage system based on this specific ancient power. So it is in fact an ancient power. Now, after helping Ratana's group escape from the forest, Kale gives closure to those still waiting for the lost family members and puts an end to a legend before heading off to the jungle. Oh my goodness, I'm not happy with this. Let me tell you why. I did not mention what the legend was. In the land of Hoik and in the forest of No Way Out, there is a legend that there is a dragon living in the forest. If you find a dragon, it will fulfill literally any wish you want. So there are people who are desperate in desperate situations who try to enter the forest to try to find a dragon to have their wishes granted. That's why when Kale returns from the forest, he is the first one to do so, because everyone else who lives in this Hoik village are people who've had family members who go into the rainforest hoping to find a dragon. And they stay there hoping one day their family will exit and they will be reunited. So when Kale returns and he tells them there is no dragon, they kind of have to accept that their family is gone. But Kale does give them closure and they are able to kind of move on from there. I really needed to reword this one better. We're moving on to chapter 17, and then we can discuss things towards the end. So in chapter 17, Kale tasks On, Hans, and the Wolf Tribe with collecting items from the deceased who entered the forest for hope before rushing towards Ratana's forest. Now, using a third of the fire-suppressing water from the permeating necklace, Kale manages to extinguish the artificial alchemy flames, although he also needed to use his shield when he got distracted by the ancient power. His goal now achieved, Kale chats with the Crown Prince, affirming his next course of action, Rayon's revenge on Benian and Marquis Sten. Now, after collecting a treasure chest of top-grade magic stones and a small plot of land, Kale returns to Hennetus County and introduces their newly acquired architect dwarf Ratfolk to his father. In Chapter 18, Kale drops a bomb of information on Count de Roof about the Northern Alliance and encourages him to strengthen and prepare the territory for the inevitable upcoming battles. Muller is left in the care of Violin, who connects him with the territory's other experts, and Kale takes on Hong, Rayon, and Choi Han, the original group, towards Sten territory, where Vikros will meet up with them later. Kale hires Odious Flynn, uncle of Belos and a prominent leader of the underworld, to prepare for Rayon's revenge. Cage, now no longer affiliated with the Church of Death, on behalf of Taylor, is kept in the loop and the volume ends there. Now, if there is anything you guys want to discuss between 16 and 18, now is your chance to do so. I know I kind of whipped through that, but it has been almost 3 hours now, and I do want to get through a couple of more things before I have to inevitably finish. But while you guys, no thoughts, head empty, it is very long. There's a lot going on, which is very fair. Let me bring up a picture of Ratana. So, Queen? It is not Ratana in the original. Oh my gosh. Queen. Jungle. The jungle. Latana. Okay, the original was Latana. Let me bring up her image. Normally what I like to do is I like to have these illustrations so we can all see who is who. Here is Ratana and her Panther 10, who I did not mention, but he is an important character. Make no mistake about that. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything that I wanted to talk about as I let you guys bask in her beauty. But one thing I think I did write down is that a lot of people in the continent seem to perceive dragons to be kind of on the level of gods, like their abilities. I think they mention so often that like a lot of people believe that dragons could have the ability to grant wishes, which is pretty crazy. The dragon, the baby dragon, Rayon, he says that even though dragons are amazing, they are not gods. So even as a 4-year-old, he knows that they cannot do that. But it's interesting how, you know, so many people seem to believe that dragons are omnipotent. Like they can do anything. Wait, or is that omniscient? Omniscience? They know everything or they can do anything. And on a quick note, it mentions that the Empire has a goal of ruling the world. So, we've already established another potential future villain. That implies the gods exist in that universe. I think it's established that it does because they mentioned that the royal family is blessed by the sun gods, right? And then they mentioned that Cage is a priestess, a late priestess, a former priestess of the god of death. So we already know of the existence of 2 gods, the sun god and the god of death, so far. Sometimes some of my notes are just queen because I just highlighted every time one of the characters was a queen. A literal queen, and also, you know, all the female characters are queens. Also, sometimes I just wrote Papa Kale. There is an existence, I think, a very firm existence of the gods, because I think they said that the god of death is very well known and wealthy because a lot of noble people use the vow of death. And because the vow of death is one of the few things that I guess it's like a guarantee, you know? So many nobles use it, but they're also afraid of it and they know it works. I think they even mentioned, like, at the very end, one of the things for Rayon's revenge is that the reason Cage is meeting with Kale is to tell Kale not to kill Bennion, because Taylor needs Bennion alive for when he becomes the next in line or the next Marquise. So I think there is a very strong belief in the gods in this universe. I think that's also the reason that they mentioned that the Crown Prince Albert has his hair dyed, because it's seen that the blonde hair of the royal family is believed to be the blessing of the sun god. So if Albert does not have blonde hair, it makes sense why he would have to make sure that he has dyed his hair to the point that even mana disturbance cannot, move it, because it's seen that is what makes them royal family and that is what keeps them as the royal family. So there's a very strong presence of the gods there in the world. Okay, I did mention the Northern Alliance and the country or kingdom of Fern. Faern. Fern. Okay. I wrote Taylor is a pearl in a family of mud. Nobles. They also mentioned that there is no underworld in the territory of Henatus. Why do you guys think that there is no underworld? I'm kind of curious if you guys have any theories on that. Because I think it's mentioned twice, once by Kale and also by Odious Flynn, who operates in the underworld. He says that there is no underworld in Henatus. On one hand, they say that it's because of the roof, and he has like a very strong hand on this. However, he does have gangsters in his territory. That's why Kale throws stuff at them. So what do you think is the reason that they might not have an underworld in Henatus? I kind of have my thoughts on it. I don't know if it's ever confirmed. Anyone else have thoughts before I share mine? I don't want my opinion to color yours. Oh, also of note, even though Cage has technically left the Church of Death, she can still use the curses in both like the Birth of the novel and also in now. Even though she's already left the church, it's said that she is still favored because she can still use things like the vow of death and curses. So it seems like the god of death is quite the god of death really likes Cage. I imagine they are mostly artisans, so not much room for underworld. Arguably, you would think that in a place where it's mostly artisans, there would be an underworld. And let me explain. In a place where they specialize in making things, I feel like there would be occasions where people make specific commissions, where people who have money go to the Henatus County because there are specialists there. So it rather than things like gambling, because it is kind of a place where people with extra spending money would go, you would think there might be an underworld. Now, personally, I think it might be because of Ron. You can tell that Ron has really kept up his abilities, and the fact that Ron, as the former head of an assassin place, he recognizes that the Henatus County was a good county. That's why he went there with his son. However, I think Ron would have a vested interest in ensuring that Vikros would grow up safe, and he would potentially personally step in to make sure that there were no underworld, because he's escaping from someone who managed to get rid of the strongest underworld families in the East Continent. Could also be Violin. Maybe. I think they mentioned that Violin. Oh no, they haven't mentioned her background. I can't mention it. Okay, Violin is not affiliated with. She's a strong woman, but she is not known to have ties to the underworld. That's what I'll say. And that is what I'll say. Now, let me go through some of the rest of my slides. I don't know if we'll be able to answer them all today. So, who do you guys think is the most impactful character in this volume? Is there a particular character that you guys think it was like they were extremely important in this volume? I need something custom made, but no would make that for. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if there are some people who wanted something very specific. Widera and or Ratana. I agree. I think Widera was extremely impactful. I feel like Ratana was not quite as impactful because she was kind of pulled around by Kale, arguably. You could think differently. Very fair. I think Widera she showed a lot of different points. For example, because she perceived Kale before and after he acquired his ancient power, we were kind of given more of a hint as to how the ancient powers affect Kale's strength and the perception of him from other people. Because Widera is literally, I think Kale mentions, she is one step below Choi Han. She is so strong. Literally so strong, because I think Kale mentions that Choi Han could destroy the continent if he wanted to. So personally, I agree with Widera. The baby that's... the scaly child is the reason why Kale can do almost everything. Very true. Very true. Arguably, if without Rayon, Kale could probably not do half of the things that he would want. Ratana's best waifu. You know what? She is. All the girls would make amazing waifus. Agreed though, definitely Rayon. Rayon is hugely important, not just because of his actual ability, but I think when Rayon makes his comments, I think I wrote down, there's one point where Rayon is confused why Kale is putting on an act for Ratana. He's a good person. Rayon thinks that Kale's a good person, but he's acting so contrary to how he normally is. But he's not doing something wrong, but Rayon can't shake off the fact, why he feels weird about it. It's so interesting to get Rayon's perspective on what Kale is doing, because he's both so innocent but so intelligent, and it brings such an interesting contrast and perspective. So you prefer Lady Amir. Also fair. I think Amir was a really great character in, the first couple of chapters. She played such a great role. And hopefully we'll get to see more of her in the next chapters. Very true, very true. And I think that's part of why Kale was willing to suggest the idea of a navy to her. Because imagine that Kale would not want to give more power to someone he did not think would use it in the right way. His priority is protecting his place, right? But he was willing to not only strengthen Amir's territory, but he trusted that her and her mother, because her mother is running the territory, that they would handle the navy well. So I think that says a lot about their character and Kale's, even if he's saying he's doing it because he doesn't want to, but also true. I think you can see how Rayon is recognizing his ability to do things. So he's saying things like, I saved someone. And he's recognizing, oh, it's good that we're doing this. But you can tell that he is developing his own sense of self. And I agree, it's such a great thing to see. He always is. I think there's one note when he mentions that he sings, when I say that he kind of sings to Rayon, Hong and On, he tells them, be gentle with him. Remember, life is precious. Kale is constantly reminding the kids to A, preserve themselves, B, protect themselves, but also he's teaching them, remember, he's trying to establish, I think, principles and morals in them as well. You can see that. He's constantly trying to find ways to do that, but within safe reason, because they're kids. So many moments where I wrote Papa Kale, and it's just about him reminding the kids. And like the kids know these things, right? But I think it's important that Kale is emphasizing it to them. Again, Kale is the best parent in the book. Now, is there a character in this volume that you guys would want to see more of? Is there a particular character that you saw and you're like, hey, I wonder or I want them to play a bigger role in the upcoming story? Widera or Ratana. I think we will see more of Widera because, like we mentioned, Kale does have the multiple favors that he can cash in on her. But Ratana would be interesting, right? Because I think Kale, his plan is not to see her again. But as we know, whenever Kale says something like that, he will probably see them again. Probably. Any other characters? Any other underrated characters? You need more Archie? You probably will see more Archie. Archie is an interesting one. The little chief mischief maker. He still is underestimating Kale. I think he's reluctantly giving in, but he still is. He doesn't really like Kale. We know that. Life is important. Don't endanger yourself. Try hard. Yes. No, you're right. I do agree that those are some of the things he's teaching them, and you can tell based on the way he's always considering them. Always has them in mind. You want to see more of Lady Amir? True, she does run the Navy, so I think it's a good chance we will see more of her. But I do agree that one thing. I was trying to think if I should mention this or not. Okay. I don't think I will. I don't think it was mentioned. But one thing I want to note about this author is there is no character wasted. That is the way I'm going to put it, okay? No character is wasted. Is there a particular scene to you guys that stood out to you the most? If so, why? If you don't have one, that's also fair. I think I shared mine earlier for you. My favorite scene in this volume was hands down the naming scene. However, is there a scene that stood out to you in a different way? Is it like a good way, a bad way, a silly way? Except for OG Kale, bro was wasted. No, he was not. Oh shoot, sorry. Fair point. This is why I said it's so hard not to give spoilers. Like I said, one thing I really like about this author is that they address a lot of tropes and they do it in a very interesting way. I will not say more than that. But is there a scene that stood out to you guys? I'm not gonna lie, one of the things I wanted to do, chat, was to do like a widget that would allow you guys to put your answers on screen. And I'm trying to figure out a way to do that, but it's kind of hard with YouTube because it's kind of slow and unresponsive. Coming back from No Way Out. Okay, so was it the scene where Kale was talking to people, or was it just the interactions he had with Ratana? Like, was it the journey back, or was it his. Oh, you're saying about the journey back, I think. Exiting No Way Out, okay. So why was that impactful to you if you don't mind sharing? Rayon being named, also our dear old man coming to understand how much Kale looks at him. Okay, so I agree with the Rayon being named, but when you're talking about, are you saying about Ron? So when Ron realized that the fact that okay, that is a line that so many people in the fandom bring up, like I the way Ron expresses himself. But I think that's also a great moment because we can even see it that Ron himself, it's interesting to know if he sees OG Kale like that or current Kale like that. Because it was OG Kale that he technically raised for so long. What other I don't know. It's such a crazy line. It is a crazy line. It's like one of those things you expect your parents to embarrass you, but technically Ron did raise Kale. When it comes to exiting No Way Out though, there is like that moment. Dragons seem pretty close to God, so for Ratana to associate Kale with a dragon says a lot, not to mention liberate that entire town after returning. Oh, okay. So you're that's the moment. Because I was kind of when we talk about that scene, it depends on like I wanted to make sure I wasn't assuming. You are right though. For Ratana to not only associate Kale, she does introduce him to her people later on as a dragon. And the fact that Kale does liberate that entire town. That's true. I did mention earlier that is a very, very crazy scene. Crazy in a good way, though. Crazy because for Kale to. Kale has been resolving problems for so long, but his problems have kind of been on like a smaller scale, if that makes sense. So for him to now liberate an entire town that wasn't really addressed because in the original novel it was just the forest would burn to the ground and those people at that point probably didn't receive closure. They knew that the forest burned down, but if they did have family who was still alive, their family could have died in that fire. In a sense, that could have been closure, but it's not quite the same as what Kale does, which is very cleanly, but also giving them the grace of also returning items to them that he found. I think there's nothing quite like that. Also, wanted to mention that Kale does mention that he lost everyone around him. So Roksu, before he became Kale, has lost literally everyone in his life, and I think it's because he has those experiences that he is willing and wants to do more when he encounters these situations. We kind of get to see why Roksu does what he does as we get to know how he was in his past life. It also helps that Kale literally has a baby dragon clinging to him constantly. True, but I would argue that simply by being around a baby dragon wouldn't necessarily make Kale like a dragon. So it is pretty significant that somehow, and I think I brought this up earlier, the fact that people in that world revere dragons so strongly that they perceive them to basically be gods. And then for the people, like a queen who has literally unified all sectors of her jungle, to view Kale as a dragon that could grant wishes, that is saying a lot for what kind of impact and what Kale is actually doing in their world. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. Kale is like I think a lot of people, if you were to find yourself in a situation where you are a sekai to another world, I doubt that there are many people who could resolve or handle things as cleanly as Kale is doing. I sure as heck I couldn't. Okay. Predictions. I think I have like 5 more slides. So if you guys have any other predictions, we can discuss those as well. But I wanted to ask, what do you guys think Kale will use the dead mana for? What do you think he'll use it for? Because we specifically know that dead mana will strengthen strengthen creatures of darkness. So what do you think Kale is saving this for? He specifically had the whales purify the poison and then give it to him. Any ideas? It was mentioned that Choi Han and Rayon both have black aura. True, but it's also mentioned that dark mana is poisonous to humans, and Choi Han is a human. And I think it also dead mana is poisonous to all living creatures. So I don't think it would suit Rayon either because he wasn't afraid of the dead mana, but Rayon didn't mention or seem interested or attracted to the dark mana. But fair point, fair point. One thing is that the novel, this is kind of a hint, it's kind of not. The novel is always emphasizing the darkness of the night. I think that in the novel, they do differentiate between black and dark. And I think Choi Han and Rayon are more on the dark side, or black side than the dark side. Well, there's a certain cat that enjoys having a bit of poison here and there. True, but Kale does not allow Hong to consume the swamp water because it's poisonous. But Hong, even though he is poison based, it would have made sense if Kale had kept the poison and removed the dead mana, right? So I think in that sense, kind of agree, kind of not sure. Just based on what we're told. I just put out the thought because sometimes it's interesting to see, based on what you guys have read so far, what you think would happen. Use it as a failsafe in case war does appear. You see, this is why I have to ask you guys. I never would have thought of that. But as someone who is scared of pain and who values life, hard to imagine that would be his thought process. Next one. This one is kind of more broad, but how do you think Rayon is gonna get his revenge on Marquis Stan and Benyon? There's also the question of what mana like that can actually be used for. Could part of it be put into the mana bombs? Maybe, because the mana, Kale is able to store the dead mana in a vessel. So it implies that there is materials that can store the dead mana. So maybe you're right. Maybe it could be used to create a specific mana bomb in the future. That is very possible. Could it be used to fake someone's death? I think not many people can sense the presence of dead mana. So in that case, I think it would induce someone's death rather than fake it because people wouldn't be able to sense the dead mana in order to confirm someone's dead, But also interesting. But the reason I ask, how do you guys think Rayon will get his revenge? Because it's said that Rayon has a lullaby that every night he tells Choi Han and Kale about what kind of revenge he wants on Benyon. So in that sense, it seems that Rayon already has a very clear idea of what kind of revenge he wants. Now, if you guys were in his shoes, what kind of revenge do you think he would get? What kind of revenge do you think he wants? I know he said worse than death already. And if you guys don't have a prediction, you can say NP or no prediction, and then I can move on. It's totally fair as well. Benyon isn't allowed to, probably Rayon would have a change of heart thanks to his experiences and growth. Maybe. Maybe. Kale is trying to raise a very positive, contributing, productive members of society with his kids. That is a possibility. Maybe he wants Rayon to see past this experience, Also true. Also true. Choi Han is someone who is constantly trying to grow and go beyond his limits. Perhaps that's also foreshadowing for Rayon, because Choi Han is also seen as a role model for Rayon. But you can tell in the way that Rayon is very specific of Choi Han and how he didn't say his name. So you can tell that Rayon does want acknowledgement from Choi Han, because he recognizes that he's one of the people who saved him. Rayon would probably normally go for something very simple and direct. That is, if he hadn't spent so much time with Kale, observing Kale, he learns how much insignificant things affect humans. You're right. Maybe Rayon is going to have very petty revenge. Maybe he's going to make everything in Venion's life for the rest of his life inconvenient. OG title is Birth of a Hero, with Kale being the current hero. Also true. The current novel we're reading is called Trash of Accounts Family. I think it's interesting that is the name chosen when the original novel was Birth of a Hero. But is Kale being the same kind of hero that Choi Han is? I'm not saying is he not being a hero. I'm saying, is he the same kind of hero? Is he having a similar journey? That is something to think about. More of a growth kind of hero? Choi Han or Kale? He already changed from the initial first impression in book 1 Kale. True. So you're saying Kale is a growth kind of hero. Also fair. He's also encouraging growth in others, so I can definitely see why you would say that. And I don't mean that in a negative way, it's just late. Fair. No one has real specifics, but don't worry, the next novel will cover that. Next slide. Kale is adapting pretty well to his new life. It's true. He's adapting abnormally well. So then predictions. This one is going to be a poll. I promise we're almost done. Will the next battle be sea or air? Why? We know that there are a bunch of battles coming up, but the question is, where will the next battle take place? And by air, I don't mean Kale will be flying in the air, because they mentioned that the Northern Alliance have a Wyvern Knights. So they will be doing in the air battle. Rayon just casts a curse to make Benion's shoelace tied to each other forever. Maybe petty revenge. I wonder why my previous Kale didn't appear. Oh, okay, you had another message, I see. Internet has been wonky. My internet has kind of stabilized, but for a while it was kind of wonky. Made me a little anxious. Now, I think this is kind of important because Kale has already mentioned they are A, establishing a navy, but B, he is having his family fortify their territory. So he's clearly anticipating both. I'd be interested to see which one you guys think will be first and potentially why. I think we'll be dealing with the mermaids first. Fair. There's just so many enemies, including the Empire, right? So technically, I could have done another option, which is the Empire, but I didn't know if that would be sea, land, or air. And then technically, it'd be all three, right? Give you guys another minute. We're almost at the end. Wow, it's been 3 hours. Originally, I did want to stream earlier so that we could have more time to talk about things like this. Next time, I promise. The next book club stream will be in May, and it'll be the end of the month, similar time, but I will start earlier. And now that I have a month and a half, I'm gonna try to incorporate things like Kahoot into it, and I'm gonna see how that works. Alright, last chance. 10 seconds to answer. And the poll is over. Okay, so 66% think air, 33% think sea. Air because we already got to see the cute whale waifu. Also, Sten territory is a bit further north, isn't it? That's true. Sten territory, for anyone who forgot, like I did, and I had to reread this, is in the northwest. So technically, it is in next to the Henatu's territory, but they are their own region, and that's why it's so important that Taylor becomes Marquis Sten, because then he'll have a whole region. And I think that's why the Crown Prince was willing to work with Taylor, because it's an important region. It's a very influential region. So I think Reiko said that mermaids, Double Red said air. Personally, I can't give a personal opinion. I already know what happens. Always interesting to see why, though. Very valid, because we are, I think, immediately in the next novel, the first thing we'll see is the Sten territory and Rayon dealing revenge on Benian. So that'll be interesting to see. Alright, so is there a character that you guys think will play a bigger role in the next volume? Now, this is kind of different than earlier when I asked you if there is a character you personally want to see. I'm just curious if there is a character you think will be more important in the next volume. Kind of like how Belios played a bigger role in this one. Also important because Albert does not have any support from any Marquis, so he needed Taylor to at least, that's true, to get rid of any opposing Sten. I think it's said that even though Albert is the crown prince, he doesn't really have anyone supporting him. So I think if he could have the leader of a whole faction, especially a Marquis, then that would be extremely important. You're right. Ron and our Vicross. Very fair. We do see that even though Ron is not currently there, he is sending letters back to Kale. So he is still, his presence is still there. And Vicross is shown to do more, and Kale is trusting Vicross with more. Very true. Any other guesses? Any other characters you think will become more important in the upcoming volume? I think they mentioned that Vicross is going to join them in the Sten territory as well, so we will get to see Vicross immediately. Taylor did not offer to support Albert, so at least the third son won't get Benian support if Benian isn't Marquis. You're right. Taylor did not unconditionally support Albert. He just promised to be the next Marquis. So at least the third son being, I think, the Crown Prince's sibling, won't get Benian's support. Yes. I think, is it mentioned that Benian is currently supporting the third prince? I think it was vaguely mentioned. Since we may end up going to the east soon, Lady Amir would come in handy and given her new position, but at the same time, I don't think they'll build it up that fast. Also true, I think Lady Amir has submitted the proposal and they are investing in it, but you do need a lot of time to build up a navy. So many ships to build. It was mentioned one time, yeah. But very good catch, very good catch. Because it is true that the third prince is technically appearing to be more favored, but he's not the crown prince. No matter what, he has still not been made crown prince, and it is still Albert. And apparently Albert has a secret behind his birth, so I think we'll get to know a bit more about that in the next volume. That is not me saying for sure, it's not a spoiler, because I do not remember when a lot of the timeline, sometimes it gets muddled for me. Not even ships, getting a whole navy to learn how to navigate those ways. Exactly, they do have to train people, they have to build ships, they have to recruit people. If it was realistic, it would take years, but because fantasy, it'll probably take a few months. Remember that they do have magic. They do have some magic, they do have magic tools, and they do have the fact that Kale is investing in, I say Kale, the Hennetu's territory is investing in a navy, so they have gold and they have experts. Especially because one of the first things Kale had Muller do, the rat dwarf, was to build plans for a boat and also build plans for a castle. So I think Kale is going to have the Hennetu specialists work on the navy, which will probably expedite a lot of their things, because having experts changes things. And when experts have a lot of capital, they will create quite quickly, because I think a lot of times it's just bureaucracy. Plus magic. Fair points. Now, very last thing. How many ancient powers do you think Kale will have in the end? Kale has 5 ancient powers so far. I'm not even counting the fire suppressing water. That does not count. That's an item. How many do you think Kale would end up with? Not in the next volume, just in the end. Let's get our predictions out now, and then when we finish the story, we'll count. We'll know. Not just without bureaucracy, but having the crown prince and money and experts and magic. Wow, that is like the fastest I think any craftsman is going to get things done. He'll collect all 7 ancient powers and summon a dragon to make a wish. I wish with all my might to fly to dragons. Wait, what was the whole thing? Shoot. Anyone else watch Dragon Tales? 14 ancient powers. Crazy. Fair. So we have 7, 14. I'm going to do a very quick poll. Very quick. Actually, no. Yeah, okay. I was going to give you guys a choice if we would read the next volume or if you wanted to read something else in between. I think I'll read the next volume. I do have some ideas for other things we can read, but I do want to continue reading Lout of Accounts Family, because I do want to try integrating Kahoot. And I think knowing, being consistent with the story will allow me to see what kind of works better. So I'll give you guys a choice sometime in July. July. Alright, that is it from me. Do you guys... Would be 1+ hour for real. Okay, we'll see. Now, do you guys have any other discussions, topics, predictions you want to toss out? That is it from me today. 3.5 hours. Oof. Sometime in the distant future. But today was good. I think working chapter by chapter is better because it allows us to talk about more things. I also prefer this format, and I will be making a form in the future where I do ask you guys for feedback on book club so I can improve it. So just keep that in mind. If you guys are willing, I would love if you guys could fill out that form. It'll probably be after the 3rd one, after I try one more format. And then I would love your guys' feedback to know what you think is and isn't working, or what would be done better. But I do like this one better. I think it was a lot easier for us to discuss things kind of as they happened. And then it also was less of me just talking. Which I know you guys don't mind, but I also like to hear from you guys. To what chapter the manhwa would I need to read for volume 3? That's a good question. So I don't know yet because I have to wait till my copy of the novel comes in, and then I know what manhwa chapter it goes up to. But Let me just double check this really quick. I think the manhwa has not yet reached the end of volume 3. Let me just look really quickly. Okay. So currently 141 on Tapas. The official manhwa only goes up to 134. I can tell you that volume 3 is beyond 134 because so far, every time we've done this, it's been about 50 chapters per volume. And since this volume ended on 110, technically my guess would be 165-ish. But I don't see a single place where it can go up to 160. So let me just check the raw chapters. Yeah, so the raw chapters are only up to 147, so you can consider it from 110 up until the last available chapter, 147. But the volume 3 will extend beyond that. Alright, that is all from me today. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Apologies for the scuff, apologies that things were not fully prepared the way I wanted it to, but keep an eye out. I will re-record and edit a plot overview, and it will have all the typical visuals that I like to include. Either way, I did really have a lot of fun talking to you guys today. I hope that you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. I always love yapping, but I'm always really enjoy seeing your guys' thoughts and perspectives because oftentimes there are things I wouldn't have thought of. And that's what makes it fun. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a good day, a good night, a good evening, wherever you guys are. Remember to take care of yourselves, drink water, stretch, stay warm or cool wherever you are. My next stream will be Friday. We will finally return to Digimon Survive. It has been 2 weeks. I am saying it now. Keep an eye out for the waiting room though. But I hope to see you guys there. And let me else. Was there anything else I wanted to mention? Alright. So this will be book club for April. Next book club will be in May. So you guys will have a whole month and a half to read the next volume. And I will make the community post and waiting room for that probably soon. I don't want to jinx it, but you guys should also keep an eye out because I finally got my blue lock cards in. It arrived yesterday. I almost missed it. I don't know how. The delivery service is like ninjas. I was in the front of my house waiting for this package because I wanted to make sure I grabbed it. Still missed the delivery guy, but I got my package. So I'm super excited to show that. I will be editing that first because I'm so excited. So we'll see. I also have other videos waiting, but my best. Waiting. The extra half will come in clutch. Oh, definitely. I'm hoping to make this next book club stream hopefully the best one. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. I have a whole month and a half to pull this off. And this time, I will check on my PowerPoint 2 weeks before stream. I will make sure that it is done. So no, don't worry, it's there. Anyways, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you to all of you, whether you are chatting, lurking, or watching the VOD. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. And hopefully next time I'll be able to start earlier. Hopefully. it should be around, well, you know what, I'll just let you guys see the waiting room because YouTube will do all the time conversion for us. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I hope I see you guys on Friday. Until Friday!